but I'm just taking what I heard. I heard your test for who's a member of the coalition, and I want to ask you, therefore, on that test, Joe Manchin is not a coalition partner.
Sorry, explain. What do you mean?
Joe Manchin did not endorse Kamala Harris, refused to endorse Kamala Harris in 2024.
Is that true? Then yeah, he was not a coalition partner in 2024.
And why are you trying to say we need more Joe Manchins?
You're not my opposition if you're like a Marxist-Leninist. Maybe your ultimate goal is like a socialist revolution. But if you're on the same page about helping to elect Democrats because you think that that helps your goal, then sure.
Then it just feels like the vanguard on that view, or at least Zach from the vanguard, would be part of the coalition and Joe Manchin would not in 2024. That's not how you act. Unfortunately, there's something very uncomfortable about what we're discovering now with this Manchin example. It is an undeniable fact that Hassan signaled more that he was going to vote for Kamala than Manchin.
I mean, I could even grant you that, and I don't understand how it undercuts my thinking at all.
It doesn't seem that there's much significance to this label opposition if it doesn't really reflect how we're going to view a person. The opposition label, the coalition, it's a red herring. It's just being used as a synonym for did you endorse or not, but there's not any other necessary entailment or prescription that comes after that. What is the so what? You know, English teachers ask, so what? What is the thing that I'm not doing that I ought do?
Do you guys want to get into why you're wrong about the DOJ stuff?
The DOJ stuff.
Yeah, Pisco, are you with Pisco? Are we on the same team? Where are we with this? Like, because that's what I was curious. Are you guys talking about the same thing?
I think Hutch has a good point, and this is a point that I've been making, and it's the same point I make with respect to the pardons of Hunter Biden, et cetera. And it is that we don't actually want the president to interfere in the line items of the Department of Justice, and we want to reestablish that as a norm. There are some norms that, even though they were violated, I agree. Some norms, we have to have reciprocity. And Jessiah has made that point. I respect that point. Some norms are more important. And to the extent that Hutch's point is, we don't actually want a president either doing it, that is to say, interfering in the line items. Yes, establishing some policies at the policy level, but at the line item, in terms of directing the prosecutions, we don't want that. And I agree with that. And if that's Hutch's point, I totally agree. And I don't even think the person running should run on that. I think the disagreement is to what extent should the president signal any kind of specificity towards investigations. And I think that I'm a level removed from Hutch, and I'm a level removed from other people in that the following. I think Hutch wants to say, hey, we're going to see crimes and I'm not going to get involved in the Department of Justice. And if there was corruption from any administration, we'll go after it. That's the kind of line I think Hutch would want to do for both political reasons and institutional reasons. I think I would say something like this. I would also have the throat clear of like, listen, the president should not, we have to reestablish that the president does not direct the Department of Justice individually. But there has been criminality in this administration. And if I have a Department of Justice, I will make sure that whichever AG that I assign will look into corruption of the previous administration. I would be okay with them saying that. We don't have to have blinders on to that existence. Hutch thinks that goes too far. And then the last level are people who are like, we will run on lock him up. We will run on go after specific persons. And so I think that's like sorry, I was talking a lot, but that was like the gradient of different views on it. And you tell me, Hutch, what you think.
No, I think you said it perfectly. I don't think that was too long-winded. That was like a very succinct way of putting it. So yeah, Jessiah, jump in with your thoughts, because we were disagreeing about this yesterday.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that I'm at the point where I would support a Democratic president saying, lock him up. I feel that's a bit too crude, a bit too precise, that the conclusion is foregone. Yeah. And I'm probably, even at this point, inclined to agree that that would violate a norm that I respect. But I'm not convinced. Once upon a time, I was convinced of this, but now I am no longer. I don't think it would be inappropriate for the Democratic candidate to say, rule of law is important. Rule of law is essential. Rule of law is the foundation. Rule of law should apply to everybody, be they on the left or the right, Democrat or Republican, senator, representative, governor, or president. And we've seen the polls, and obviously I'm running. Why I'm running is in part because I think that the Trump administration was incredibly corrupt. And I believe in accountability. I believe that the American history is littered with examples of subsequent administrations turning a blind eye to the corruption of their predecessors because we don't want to be a banana republic. But the other element of a banana republic is one that will not punish political corruption when it's there. Going after your political opponents simply because they're your political opponents, that is the stuff of banana republics, but giving a free pass to corrupt politicians is also the stuff of banana republics. And we can join the company of advanced democracies like France and South Korea and Japan, who have investigated and prosecuted corrupt public officials. And so I want a Justice Department. I'm committing to a Justice Department that will follow the facts wherever they may lead. But I do want a Justice Department that will examine the actions of the previous administration, and where they find lawlessness, they should prosecute, and where they do not find lawlessness, they should not. Something to that effect. I think we're past the point of the Biden approach to things, which is to simply not comment. I think the Democratic base is past that point, and I see no political advantage to that approach. I certainly don't see an accountability approach to that point. And I would personally not be satisfied as a voter for any Democratic candidate who just kind of vaguely says,
I don't know.
I believe in corruption, or I believe in punishing corruption, or looking at accountability, but otherwise no comment. I would not be satisfied with that.
Me neither. What's wrong with that?
I think there's a few things wrong with that.
Sure.
But you say that, why is it important that we have this norm? What if you guys maybe Jessiah, let me ask you, why do you think this norm is a good norm to have, of a president not personally involving themselves in any kind of prosecutorial decisions?
It's not because
even
yeah.
investigatory. I can't think of the word.
I think it's the potential abuse. So the truth is, I don't know where Pisco falls in this. I actually don't think that in all instances it's inherently corrupt or inherently inappropriate, especially because law enforcement power derives from the president. The attorney general is acting as an agent of the president. Donald Trump is not wrong when he says technically, in some respects, he is the chief law enforcement officer of the land. We just simply delegate that to the attorney general. It's not because the norm is important, not because it's inherently wrong in every instance for a president to direct investigations or order investigations or set priorities. The reason the norm is important is because of the potential abuse that it could create, where instead of investigating people who are corrupt, who also happen to be your political opponents, you are simply investigating your political opponents to punish them.
I want to add just one quick thing to that, go ahead. Because I think that Josiah's point there is really important. That there are sometimes instances where the president commenting on directing investigations is totally appropriate. And those are situations of the highest level of importance, and when the fear of political prosecution are relatively low. So an example of this is 9/11. Okay? It would be totally appropriate in response to, for example, 9/11, or something really involving like international type situations, where the president said, I've directed my attorney general to initiate prosecutions and investigations into the terrorist scum who attacked us on 9/11, where it gets more dicey. And so the two preconditions at bare minimum are high interests of the United States, and where there's not a fear as much of political manipulation. Because when you start to deviate from that, and it's like, okay, it's terrorism, but it's politically motivated terrorism, then it's not of the same character, the international character of those kinds of events, then I'm starting to say, okay, I'm not sure. Mass casualty events, massacres, bombs on shit, then I think it's appropriate, where no reasonable person would say the president shouldn't be involved there.
But right, so you're talking about broader policy, though. So, for example, the Biden administration and Obama, as far as I remember, I think both of them directed DOJ to look at police accountability. I think both DOJs looked into police departments across the country and identified abuses of power, excessive force, racial profiling, these kinds of things. That's like a broad policy
for Biden as well. Yes, that's all correct.
Yeah, so it's not. Right. So it's not inappropriate for the president to have some influence over what DOJ focuses on in terms of a priority. I mean, Donald Trump, they're, choosing to focus on Antifa, for example, over white supremacy. And that's not necessarily like a corrupt thing. It's stupid, I think, but it's not corrupt in the way that I'm connecting with what you guys are proposing. I think the other important reason for having that kind of independence for the DOJ is about public perception. Like, if you have a situation where the president is directing the DOJ to specifically target groups of people, say, for example, the former cabinet members and Trump himself, that's when the public loses confidence that this sort of investigation will be free from partisan influence. That's a really, really important factor to all this. And in the current kind of dynamic in the Trump era, it's really obvious that the public across both sides of the aisle have lost faith in our institutions and have lost faith in these norms that were pretty firmly held for like 4 decades before Trump came along, which is specifically being this norm of the independent nature of DOJ. If we're ever going to get back to a situation where trust is restored in that kind of a thing, it has to come from like one of the parties just choosing to do that. And I guess where I get concerned, or I guess where I get confused with what you guys are proposing, is that in my mind, it's just not necessary. You can have it both ways. You can have a situation where your DOJ does pursue investigations and potentially criminal charges for former cabinet members, and you can uphold and reestablish this norm at the same time.
Can I ask you some questions? I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
Well, I'm wrapping it up here.
Sure.
I'll just repeat what I said to you on Twitter. All you got to do is you can do kind of dog whistly kind of stuff. Like, all you got to do is just have President Newsom get up there and say, I want the DOJ that's operating underneath me to focus heavily on government corruption. And to that end, I would like to nominate Jack Smith to be Attorney General. And you know that guy is going to pursue charges, if assuming that Trump doesn't pardon himself and his cabinet. And in that case, the conversation entirely becomes moot. But why is your method more preferable than mine? I just feel like you guys saying that he should specify who DOJ should go after, that to me just feels so unnecessary.
So, number one, I'm not sure. I mean, I agree that, at least based on how he answered questions under oath and how he conducted himself as special counsel, I think that Jack Smith is certainly, a more ideal archetype for Attorney General, particularly in this era, 2026, 2028, than Merrick Garland ever was. I think Merrick Garland had a judicial temperament because he was a judge for so long. He was actually a legendary prosecutor before then, but I think he kind of morphed into more of an impartial judge. And when you're an attorney general, you're supposed to be a prosecutor. You're adversarial by nature. So I think he was a total misfit. So I agree that Jack Smith would be a better archetype for that. I'm not convinced, though. I mean, this is just anecdotally engaging with my audience and seeing, reactions online. I'm not sure the Democratic base, I think there are some prudential concerns. I think the Democratic base wants to hear from the nominees a platform of accountability and reform and not just assume. They want the dog whistles to be quite explicit. So I think there's some prudential reasons for energizing our base why that's important. But let me ask you some questions to kind of like create the contour here. Is yours a concern of principle or prudence, or both?
Both. I would say both. The principle itself is important, but there's also just like obvious benefits, I think, to my proposal over yours. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, just because I want to interrogate it, what if the principle and the prudence are at odds? So let's say you find data that suggests that the Democratic base is less likely to turn out. They're less likely to be enthused if the candidate does not talk about investigating the Trump administration. And that could potentially cost us elections. What happens if the principle and prudence go into conflict?
In the current moment that we're in right now, I would probably pursue I would place the highest priority on beating Republicans.
Right, yeah.
And so I think I would compromise on that principle if it meant beating JD Vance, just because I do believe that this is a nascent fascist movement, and I just think that you might have to compromise on some principles if you're doing that. But I take your point on the thought experiment, but I can't really envision a future where, I mean, look at where the party's at right now. I mean, the result out of Texas over the weekend. We're going to have some special elections tonight. I'm pretty confident that there's going to be massive overperformances there. We're headed to just a fucking bloodbath in the midterms. Go ahead, Pisco. You look like you're ready to jump in there.
I just wanted to bolster Jesiah's point a little bit in the prudential side of things in the factual dispute, because I like a lot of what he was saying there, and I have some responses. Listen, you're talking to one of Merrick Garland's last fucking defenders on the wall. I'm not the last motherfucker on the wall, but I agree with a lot of what Jesiah said. Here's my concern. I want the candidate to be able to speak openly, frankly, and honestly about the criminality that we're seeing in the administration. In other words, if a moderator were to ask a candidate, hey, like, do you think that they did any crimes? Like, I could imagine that very much being a question that not just a moderator, someone at a town forum could ask. They say they're frustrated. They say, you're trying to run for president. We're seeing all these crimes happen. What do you think about that? Do you think that these are crimes? And I want a president to be able to answer frankly and say something like, yes, obviously, I think this is the most corrupt thing. And I would be lying to you if I said I didn't think that they were doing criminal things, covering up murder. I would be lying to you if I didn't think that what happened there was murder. That said, I have a responsibility not to prejudge investigation as president. I wouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. I would appoint an attorney general who I know would look into such criminality. But I, as president, understand it's different than me as an observer. I couldn't weigh into that thing, but I absolutely think it's criminal, and I absolutely would appoint someone to look into it. I think that because what it opens the door for you, if you phrase it like that, is you're able to speak frankly about the facts and say, hey, JD Vance, you're supporting a criminal. You're covering up murder. You guys should be in jail. Like, I want him to be able to speak like that. And having a situation of not saying anything related to crimes, I think puts you in a back foot. You're playing with hands behind your back, but I'll let you talk.
I just feel like we are so close to having the same kind of view of it, because I agree. If there's a debate moderator that asks that question, I do want the candidates to be open and honest and say, well, I'm looking at the same administration that everybody else is. And we can see very plainly that there's corruption here on a level that we haven't seen in this country maybe ever. The president has made over $2 billion just in his first year from a fucking meme coin. And now there's this reporting about was it the UAE or was it a Saudi? I can't remember.
UAE, yeah.
So like, I'm fully on board with that. There was like literally just one kind of sequence of words in what you just proposed, Pisco, that I think is the issue, which is I'm going to point, like, the president should not come out and say, I'm going to appoint an attorney general that will look into the Trump administration. What they should say is they should just make it very, very broad. Like, you can say all that. Yes, I do think he's committed crimes. Yes, I don't think that anybody is above the law. And yes, I do think there should be consequences for the criminality of the previous administration. That's why I'm committing to nominating an attorney general who will aggressively pursue any and all government corruption that they find.
I want to let Jesiah in, because I'm sorry, Jesiah, because I know you're chomping at the bit.
No, you're good, man.
One other point that I wanted to make on that, which is, there's probably reasons legally that Trump and his cronies will be able to try to insulate themselves from criminal punishment. And those will require political solutions if you want to get rid of it. Things like, for example, saying, I want to pass an amendment to get rid of the immunity decision, or I want to increase the court personnel because they packed it before, and look at the decisions that prevent us from getting actual justice on what's happening here. And so I agree that, if this were,
would you call yourself an actual justice warrior?
I'm an actual justice warrior, but like there are impediments.
We're gonna have him on the pod at some point.
Oh, we should, yeah. There are impediments to actually getting impartial justice whose only possible solutions are political in nature, and will require the president to weigh in terms of legislations, potential amendments, judicial reform, that kind of stuff. And so, given that they're going to try to pardon everyone else, they're going to try to extend immunity. This is a political issue now, and it's inexorably linked to the politics of the moment. I want to respect that norm, but we're in a very different situation, in my opinion, and that requires comments that maybe in previous administrations I would think are not valuable to make, or that are unwise to make in those contexts. Now it does require politics to get involved, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I just want to follow up on some of the questions I had. So I asked you about the principle versus prudence. If in a thought experiment, because I could easily see this happening where the two come at odds, you answered candidly, you probably would defer to prudence in that situation. I want to kind of ask a similar question before I follow up on your answer, which is, let's say that the American people at the end of Trump say, you know what, we're just exhausted. We just truly want to move on. We're going to vote for Democrats, but we don't want the Democratic Party, we don't want the next administration to investigate or prosecute previous crimes by the Trump administration. Just fuck it. He gets away with it. Let's move on. What about that? Where, again,
That's
principle and prudence get in conflict.
That's a good question. If the public were, now I realize this is just a hypothetical because I don't think this is very likely to happen, right? I don't think you think that either. But like in that situation, if I felt like the current Democratic Party administration pursuing charges against the previous administration, if I felt like that was going to like lose us seats in the midterms, then I would oppose it.
Sure. Yeah.
But my again, like my principle is guiding that, and my principle right now is we have to beat Republicans.
That's your higher order.
Elections.
That's your higher order objective and principle there.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not so much
a
principle as it is. Yeah. It's a specific outcome that you're working towards, and I understand that. I sympathize.
Well, it's a principle of harm reduction. It's a principle of harm reduction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, a couple of other things. Then go back to the first answer you gave about principle and prudence being in conflict. You talked about where the party is right now, and I agree that there are some really positive signs about the midterms. Do you separate that from the base wanting accountability for Trump? Because it seems to me that that's probably the single most important motivator for why we're seeing the outcomes that we're seeing, is that the American people want a check on Trump. That's the reason they're voting for Democrats. They do want accountability. They are specifically empowering Democrats at the congressional level to be a brake check on him and to have hearings into him and to do all these things. So it sounded like in your previous answer, one of your previous answers, that you were separating these things. Like, hey, this surge that we're seeing where the party actually has very little to do with accountability. I would just ask you to clarify, because I think it has a lot to do with accountability.
I didn't hear that.
Pisco, you look like you wanted to jump in.
No, yeah, I didn't hear that from Hutch. I think his contention was it's not necessary. Like, you can get all of the benefit of like the accountability rhetoric without the president directly saying such things. And so given that he thinks like, what is the value add, the marginal value add of the president themselves taking this kind of tone, as opposed to spokespeople, as opposed to other individuals who, even though they're not a part of the campaign, are like clearly going to speak in conjunction with, or like are part of the movement broader. Why is it so important for the president, for these to sort of capitalize on these very real feelings? Why does the president need to get involved? Is that sort of your objection?
The reason that I don't think it's quite analogous is because this isn't a presidential election, so we wouldn't expect anybody. There's no candidate running on prosecuting Trump.
I know, but Hutch is talking about that though.
Right, but that I guess that's why I'm saying I'm not sure how instructive what we're seeing right now. What relationship that necessarily has with a presidential campaign in 2028, because I would argue a huge reason that these off-year elections and special elections have been so favorable for us is that, in part, we're hearing the Democratic Party say, hey, if you give us back power, if you give us control of the House and you give us control of the Senate, we will investigate Donald Trump. They're not hinting like, we'll try to work with the president. Like, no, we're going to give this motherfucker the finger. We're going to hit him in the balls.
I'm so sorry. I'm usually in the direct opposite position, but it doesn't feel like you're responding to Hutch's point.
Yeah.
So like, I think that Hutch is talking specifically about the president's role there, and he's accepting that people are motivated for punishment and accountability in the context of these elections. That's what the special elections shows. He's not contesting that. I think he's saying there's a special rule for the president. Unlike Congress people, where their investigations are inherently political, that's part of the expectation. That's part of the norm. There is no norm of non-political investigations from the branches of Congress. The norm exists with respect to the ability of the state to put you in jail and to give an indictment which has all of the burdens. And so he's saying what the special rules should be for the president, and you should respond to that.
I understand that's what he's saying the special rules for, and I understand that logic. What I'm saying is I don't know what the special elections this year and last year's off-year elections have to do. If I remember correctly, what he said was, you got to look at where the party is now. And he was citing how well we are doing in the 2025 elections and the 2026 special elections. And my thought process is, I don't know what that has any relationship to a 2028 presidential campaign on which the candidate may or may not campaign on holding the Trump administration criminally accountable for what they've done in those 4 years. And as a matter of fact, the only connection I see is that the people who are doing well, that the party that's doing well right now is the party that's doing well on campaigning in opposition to Trump and holding investigations. I understand congressional investigations and executive investigations are separate, but I don't see where this is instructive for 2028.
But I think respectfully, of course, because you're my boy. I love you.
Sure.
Josiah, you're my boy. I love you, dog. I fucking love you. I don't think that's why the Democrats are doing so well right now. I don't think it's because Democrats in special elections are running on accountability for the Trump administration. That's not what we're actually seeing. Like Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill, they were not running on, pressing for accountability for Trump. I haven't seen any campaigns that are running on this explicitly at all. They're all running on affordability and just sort of like the anti-corruption is like a big thing that's salient with voters right now, but they're not running on like, we're going to lock him up.
Well, no, can we just adjust what Josiah said? So Josiah, I think the strongest version of what he's saying is, regardless of whether the campaign specifically, quote, is running on it, that part of the reason we're seeing this outgrowth of special elections and all these movements is because of opposition to Trump, and not just about because we really, really care about the Texas Senate district, whatever. It's because people are outraged at what they're seeing from the administration, as opposed to like the rhetoric specifically from the campaign. But maybe that speaks to your point, Hutch, about the rhetoric not being necessary.
So every candidate, or most candidates, unless you're living in like a blowout district or state, they have to balance the demands and the needs and the desires of their base with the center. And so I agree that right now the Democratic voter base are like frothing at the mouth with rage and want like Nuremberg trials for the administration. I can see that that's where they're at, but that is not necessarily going to be a campaign strategy that is going to build a bigger coalition to maximize. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me clean up here, because I understand what the confusion is, and this is where I misspoke. What I'm referring to is the leadership of the Democratic Party. So what do we hear from Hakeem Jeffries and Robert Garcia, the ranking member of the House? What are they? Because I interviewed Garcia. What's he saying? Put us back in power. If you put us back in power, top priority is to investigate the Trump administration, check corruption, because they know in terms of like affordability, they're not going to be able to do anything meaningful on affordability until they get the White House, right? So the next 2 years of the Trump administration, what are Hakeem Jeffries and Robert Garcia and congressional leaders talking about? Give us back power. We will check this administration. So I agree with you that the candidates running, especially in swing districts, are not like campaigning on, hey, elect me and I'll check Trump. What I'm saying is that the people that they would be ultimately working under, a leader Jeffries or a oversight chairman Garcia, et cetera, and so forth, they're like, hey, here's why you should come out and vote and give us, these seats, is because we will then take that power and investigate the shit out of Trump. That's what I'm talking about.
But that's we're getting into what Pisco was saying, which is like, my whole thing is that the special rule literally only applies to the president. Rashida Tlaib, when she won her seat in 2018, in her acceptance speech, she said, we're going to impeach that motherfucker. Like, I don't think that was necessarily politically prudent, but I don't have a problem with her saying that, because that the Congress is a totally different.
It's a political process.
Their job is to pursue. Yeah, their job is to pursue political remedies to these kinds of things. That's fine. I think that when Garcia said that to you, that was him like throwing red meat to the base. But if Garcia was running in a competitive district, and I don't know what his districts he serves and if it's competitive, but if he was, those candidates, I can basically guarantee you that we're not going to see a single Democratic Party candidate running for seats in the Congress that are going to be running on like, we're going to eventually prosecute Donald Trump. We're eventually going to impeach them. All of those people are going to run on like your energy bill and gas prices.
Uncontested. I totally agree with that. I'm just saying the leadership has made it clear that if and when they get power, their priority in the age of Trump will be to punish Trump congressionally. But again, I understand that there's a difference to you between the legislative process and the executive process. I agree with that. That's why I'm saying I'm not buying the argument that, this isn't something that a presidential candidate in 2028 need not campaign on crushing corruption and investigating corruption and holding the Trump administration accountable simply because in 2026
they should run on those things, but not the third thing. You said crushing corruption, investigating corruption, and then looking into Trump. Like drop the third one and you're good.
Yeah, so
Well, I think I'm convinced it needs to be all the above, but that's why I'm saying I don't think that
I
there's
don't understand.
Yeah,
But what is
so
this? What you seem to
benefit.
think that there's like an electoral? You think that you seem to think that we might net more seats, or the presidential candidate on the Democratic side of the aisle might get more votes by running on this. And I don't know what that is based on, because it feels like, and this is my problem that I'm having with a lot of left-wing pundits these days, is that they're purely speaking to the base. They're not really thinking holistically about, in my opinion, they're not thinking holistically about like the broader American electorate. And there are a lot of people in the center, or that are politically unaffiliated with either right-leaning or left-leaning independents or true centrists, that are looking for a path to get back to certain norms that used to facilitate a much more like functional version of government. Bipartisanship and independent investigations free from political influence. Like, there are a lot of people in the center that are looking for a return to that. I don't think that it's going to benefit the Democratic Party to just run on things that are going to appeal to their base. I also don't find the argument very compelling that the Democratic Party voter base is not going to be wildly enthusiastic and engaged in terms of showing up to vote in both the midterms and the 2028 election. I think those elections are going to be fucking blowouts. I think we're going to see enormous voter participation, like really high levels of engagement.
I am certainly not making the case that in a general election, punishing the Trump administration or investigating the Trump administration a centerpiece or a central pillar of your campaign. I'm not making the case that that's going to win over swing voters, or is more likely to win over swing voters than not. What I am saying is, it's my assessment that in a Democratic primary, the Democratic base is more likely to support a candidate that is more vociferously in favor of something like that than not.
Well,
that's what go
ahead, Pisco. You haven't spoken.
I think that I'm not convinced that there's a huge political cost to independence. I'm not convinced that the additional just like you're saying, well, what additional good does it do to attract voters to say that actually, and we're going to look into the crimes that probably happened in the administration. What good does it do? I'm not convinced, that it's particularly risky. Two, I think that the political benefit is less to do with the statement itself, but more so how it unchains the candidate. I want to be able to use the populist rhetoric of, these guys stole your money. These guys scammed you. These guys allowed fraud to happen. We're going to try to get your money back. That's going to be a priority of the administration, of any kind of administration that I'm a part of. We're going to try to get the money that they scammed from you, that they grafted from the American people, all the bribes and stuff, because that's your money. And being open about that, I think, unchains the candidate to be more plain spoken, to be more honest and blunt, while maintaining always the notion of the principle, which matters to me, that I won't get involved in the day-to-day, but it will be a priority. And then number two, this is totally separate from the political benefit. Even if I was convinced there was a very slight political loss overall, it's worth it to me. The reason it's worth it to me, because I want to increase the odds that it actually happened. And him being on the record saying that they're going to do these investigations, to the extent that they want, it would show a mandate for that policy, and it would give it more legitimacy for that policy. And two, having candidates on the record does in fact pressure, to bring those promises up in any other given context. And then finally, in a primary situation where I'm trying to decide which candidate I want to back, put my eggs behind in different contexts, I want to know, because it's my top priority, which among them has the best interest of what I think the American people are at heart. So all those different things, the fact that I don't think it's incredibly risky politically, the fact I think to the extent that it is anything, it is more likely to cause a candidate to be candid with the American people and say, hey, J.D. Vance, you are the one trying to hide the graft and the corruption, and we're going to try to get the money back because we're going to look into what you did. I think that is a political benefit to the candidate itself in signaling. And then finally, I think that it is a more likelihood that when you have that commitment actually be followed through and have legitimacy from the American people.
I'm still not really understanding why your method is preferable to mine, because I feel like using my method, you can have both of these things. You can have government accountability, and you can have an example of a political party seeking to, firmly reestablish a norm that I think is really important.
You have
And
half
I think
of it.
that matters.
You have half of it. You have you have the critique, which is you guys did criminal stuff, but you don't have the other half of the populist rhetoric, which is, and we're gonna get that back, and we're gonna make sure the American people are repaid for that, or we're at least gonna try doing it. You're gonna continue to hide for your billionaire friends, and we're actually going to make sure that, to the extent possible, we're gonna get that back for the American people because that's their money. That's.
I guess here's another thing that maybe there's a disconnect here is like, I think that this principle is actually really fucking important. So it's not just about like the politics of it. Like, I do think it is corrupt for a president to be directing DOJ to investigate specific people. I think it's thoroughly corrupt.
No, but that's not what we're talking about.
And so
that's not what I'm saying. Did you think that I'm saying that he should order the department to look into particular people?
Well, when you say, the administration fleeced you from tax dollars or what, I don't know how exactly you said it. That's what you're saying, right? You're saying, and we're going to look into that.
Yeah,
that's what you're saying. You're saying
that's not particular people. Agree that's not literally particular people.
Well, no, it's a particular group of people. Like you're saying that you're gonna, but you are saying that you're gonna instruct your DOJ to investigate the previous administration. I actually think I'm
gonna pick an attorney general for whom that is a priority. Yes, I think that's important.
I think that this is that I don't want to live in a country where that is like the norm moving forward. I think that's a really, really awful way to do criminal justice in a country. I don't think the leader should be instructing the Justice Department.
I don't think you think this,
to go after specific individuals.
Hutch, remember Maidan and like the massacre that occurred with the protesters. Let's say that we have a situation in which like there's actually decent information that Trump or JD Vance or Noam or someone ordered like a massacre of 20 protesters. In that situation, now I know it's different than the situation we have now. Why would it be wrong for presidential candidates say like, and we saw the massacre that occurred that day, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. They're going to cover it up. We're going to investigate the massacre that took place, that someone in the administration, they're hiding it. Someone in the administration is covering this up. It gave the order. We're going to find out who. Would that be wrong to do?
Or I would say like a more concrete example, the timeline doesn't quite add up, but just imagine January. Imagine like, so in Brazil had their own version of January 6th. It was January 8, 2023, and it happened after Lula da Silva was already inaugurated, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't like where they were certifying his votes. He was already in power. But Bolsonaro supporters stormed the executive building, the legislative building, the judicial building. So imagine a January 6th, which happened not before Biden was in office, but imagine after he had already been inaugurated. And President Biden was asked, sir, yesterday, Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol, stormed the White House or whatever. Will you be, what's your comment on that? Will the administration be looking into that? Blah, blah, blah. What would... In that sort of hypothetical, what would you expect?
The administration broadly would not be the ones looking into it. It would be the Justice Department. And I think you can answer that question in a way that gets to the point without sullying or dirtying the waters. You can say like, of course, I feel total confidence that the Justice Department that operates underneath me will do everything in their power to investigate like these kinds of matters. You would just say it very broadly. And you can like dog whistle, I suppose. But do you want a situation where, President Biden is calling up Merrick Garland and saying, I want you to like go after.
No.
Okay. But
no, that's not what I'm calling for.
Wait, but aren't you though? If you're saying you want Gavin Newsom to pledge to investigate the Trump administration for whatever crimes or whatever, I don't understand how you get there without instructing your attorney general to go after specific people.
What if he gave an like this in that hypothetical? I'm curious because I personally that still didn't sound like a clean answer because it really, you say dog whistle, it sounded like a pretty strong signal to the attorney general publicly to investigate such a thing. What would be wrong in this hypothetical was the president saying something like this? The attack on the Capitol, which happened yesterday, was a heinous attack on our democracy by people who can't accept the results of a free and fair election. It was unprecedented in the history of this nation. And of course, I expect the Justice Department to look into the situation and follow the facts without fear or favor wherever they may lead. But of course, I expect the Justice Department to look into this. What would be wrong with that answer?
I mean, that's a little bit better, I suppose. It's like a little bit better, but
I have an
Well, that's
expectation.
what-
I have a desire. I want my whoever, and this is how I would phrase it, just to get your to make sure that you understand. I'm not saying that he would say I'm going to order the attorney general to have specific investigations. It would be like whichever attorney general I select, I'm going to make sure that it matters to him to go after corruption from the previous administration. But I'm not going to interfere in particular investigations. I'm not going to make charging decisions. I'm just going to select an attorney general who I know is apolitical, who's ruthless, who will investigate previous corruption crimes from the administration specifically. I'm not going to ignore the massive graft and corruption that we're seeing now. We're going to hold them fully accountable in an administration. Doesn't mean I'm going to get involved in everything, but my attorney general will be
essentially lock
someone.
him up, but that's lock him up dressed in flowery language. That's what that is.
No, it's not. I don't think it is.
Yeah, you're saying my administration is gonna,
You're promising not to interfere. You're promising not to interfere in the Justice Department, but your personnel decisions, as every president has, will be dictated by the values of you, and one of those values will be going after corruption. And it would be foolish for us to ignore the elephant in the room. And yeah, we're not going to do it for political reasons. I will instruct my attorney general, if there's no crime there, we're not going to do what Trump did and just do these like crazy charges against James Comey. We're going to follow the facts and law, but we're not going to not talk about the elephant in the room. And that's what I'm saying. And
well, at that point, we're just on that merry-go-round until somebody gets off. Because the next administration that's Republican, they're going to do the same thing.
You're doing the false equivalence.
That'll be justification for the next Democratic president to do the same thing. And it's at some point, the one political party or one leader of the political party is going to have to make the conscious decision to just get off of that merry-go-round. Like this is like a very, very, to use a phrase that's a bit problematic, I suppose, but this is a very slippery slope. If we just continue that policy of just abandoning that norm altogether, then
Hutch, can I ask you something? Can I ask you something about this?
I want to ask you though, like, do you agree that if we're ever going to get back to that norm, which you say is good, you say that that's a good norm, you say that there's value there.
I don't think I violated the norm. I don't believe I'm violating the norm.
Of it announcing in advance that your administration is going to investigate particular individuals, that's absolutely a violation of the norm that was established after Nixon.
But Hutch, he rejects the premise because he's referring to the Trump administration as a class of people. Just like I am instructing my DOJ to investigate, the mafia. Yeah.
Wait, why is that not? Why is that not an apt comparison? It would be like saying I'm investigating fraud in the Somali community. I'm investigating fraud in the American Italian.
But guys, the norm is the independent nature of DOJ in terms of like, in terms of their prosecutorial or their investigatory.
Yes. My statements are all consistent with that. No, yes, for the president not to get involved in particular investigatorial or charging decisions. But the top, so we just have a different view on the level of generality.
That means not directing them to do things.
No, I'm not suggesting. So I just want to be clear. I'm not suggesting any direction from the president to the attorney general, really on anything I said so far. So I want to make sure that we agree. Like, do you agree that I'm not suggesting that the president direct the attorney general to do anything?
Well, you said my administration is going to look into this and that thing, right?
Yeah, it's a promise to the American people that will be accomplished.
Even that language, but that language though, completely violates the principle of the independent nature.
That's not making directions to the attorney general. Then I don't think the promise violates it. I'll tell you why.
To say that my admin is going to look into the previous administration, to me like just the language. The
Department of Justice is part of the administration.
No, but you understand what I'm saying, though. The norm is that even though the DOJ exists underneath the branch of the executive branch, they are an independent. They operate independently. That's the norm. So when you say my admin is going to go after
at a certain level, at a certain level, right? At the level of individual investigatory and charging decisions, at that level, not at the policy level. You granted that the president can have influence on the policy level. For example, if Biden said, "My administration, we are going to go after high-level drug importers," or "We're going to go after the worst of the worst when it comes to these cartels, the Italian mafia. We're going to go after people who are committing election fraud." We wouldn't have those kinds of views from a policy perspective. What I'm suggesting to you is the promise that I would offer is
but I want to jump in real quick, though.
Not individual.
No, but like so in like, I agree with what you're saying, like a policy level kind of a thing. There's a difference between, so for example, like imagine Biden, there was a ton of political pressure on him to, there was some like a criminal gang that was like importing a lot of fentanyl or whatever. You wouldn't have a situation, it wouldn't be appropriate for Biden to necessarily say like, I want you to look into like this specific gang. You would have a policy decision in that respect would be, I'm instructing my DOJ to ramp up their efforts to crack down on drug importation and drug trafficking. So if we're going to make draw an analog between like that and what we're talking about here, the broader kind of promise or policy agenda that the president could set would, I'm directing DOJ to focus a lot of their resources on government corruption without getting into the specific gang, which would be the administration.
You think there would be something wrong with it? You think there would be something wrong with the president coming out and being like, listen, La Cosa Nostra is a plague, and we see their constant criminality and racketeering and bootlegging. And so my administration, we are going to take the fight to La Cosa Nostra. You think that would be wrong to do?
Not necessarily, but that's like a different kind of context because that wouldn't be like a political prosecution. But even that might be problematic because you don't want the president to say, I want you to focus on that gang. Well, what if they get intelligence like 3 days later that actually this other gang over here, they're importing 3 times more fentanyl? Like that's why the president involving themselves in those kind of investigations is not ideal.
I don't think that's ideal.
It could produce bad results.
I want to get clarity on this point. At a bare minimum, you will grant that we're not talking about the president in his office directing the attorney general in the sense of giving orders. You'll at least agree that neither Jesiah nor I are talking about the president getting involved in the sense of when he is president, telling individual people what to do. We're not talking about that. Fair?
Well, no, I disagree. Because if you say my administration will look into the Trump administration, how do you get there without instructing DOJ to do that?
By appointing personnel.
But that's what I'm saying.
No, I understand.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm saying you do it by appointing people that you have confidence will pursue these crimes.
I understand that. I just want to separate in our heads individual directives from a president to the main justice and appointing someone has a particular desire. Those are different actions.
Yes, but your language, your language necessarily implies a level of like direction.
Well, it doesn't necessarily imply directives to the attorney, any kind of particular communication between the president and the DOJ. Agreed? It doesn't imply that.
I think it kind of does.
How?
If you say my admin is I'm going to make sure that my admin investigates the Trump administration. Then that corruption. I think necessarily implies, then you just say again, government corruption. Wait, can we back up just a little bit though? Because are you guys convinced that, appealing to the base in this kind of way is necessary electorally, or I guess in a different way, like, or Jesiah, maybe you can jump in here. Do you guys think that, that promising to go after the Trump administration, like Newsom promising specifically to go after the Trump administration, is like necessary to energize the Democratic voter base sufficiently that they'll show up in large numbers? Or
I don't know if I want to say necessary because it implies it's outcome determinative. Let me put to you like this. I feel that we will see more energy and better numbers among the base for a candidate who does publicly commit in some way, shape, or form. And again, we can workshop the language that he makes it clear that the Trump administration will be investigated. Yes. So for example, like the only thing I can come up like in my mind is like, I'm thinking of like an Andy Beshear or a Gavin Newsom. I think the base wants somebody with more of a Newsom posture than a Beshear. And I lived under Beshear, and I think he's an amazing governor, but he's the Mr. Rogers of Democrats. I'm not convinced that the base will be like, God damn, Andy, you're going to be great in 2032 or 2036. But right now we want a fucking bulldog. So that's what I believe. Now, what are the sort of like electoral outcomes? I'm not sure. But just like engaging with my audience and engaging with the audiences of other people, and maybe I'm just too terminally online, and maybe I interpret the polls too liberally when they say that they want fighters and the Democratic base wants fighters and they want to hold the Trump administration accountable. Yeah, I do think it will be important for the base maybe not outcome determinative. I'm not prepared to say that at this point for a candidate to campaign on this. That's where I am. I can't speak for Pisco.
When I hear necessary, I hear like incredibly important for, right? Like by necessary, you mean like something that is super, like almost vital. And it's like a humongous thing if we don't. I don't agree on that level that it's hugely significant. I agree with what everything Jesiah just said, which is that all else equal, I do think it will help and help Democrats. And to the extent that that's what you mean by necessary, which is it makes it more efficient, it makes it more likely, then I agree with that. But I don't think it's like strictly necessary. That said, I've laid out other reasons besides public opinion for why I think it's the good position to take. And I don't think it violates the principle of non-interference by the president, because I think I construe this as part of a policy level investigation promise, not a particular action. I know we are going to charge Trump, we are going to charge Vance, we are going to lock these people up specifically, and if they don't, I will get someone who will. That is not what we're talking about. And we're not talking about any particular internal action in the executive branch other than the normal appointments process of someone who's a bulldog and someone who cares about this shit. And if it were the case, for example, that we got information that the next Democratic president were ordering the Department of Justice in the way Trump is to indict particular people, or why haven't you moved fast on this or that, I would say that's corrupt. So and I've been consistent about that. That's my belief on Biden's pardon. That's my everything. And I just don't consider the kind of statements that we're talking about to be that level of interference or to promise that level of interference. I view it as a policy directive.
I don't want to inundate Hutch, but when Hutch, because if Hutch wants to respond, I do want to return to something when he's done responding about. He was talking about the merry-go-round earlier, and there was like
I wanted to get back to that.
Yeah. So, Hutch, I want to talk about the merry-go-round. Spend like 20 minutes, so I can't remember your exact phrase about it. But
basically, I was saying somebody needs to make a conscious decision to just establish that norm.
Do you think we're on a merry-go-round now?
In what, in a broad sense? What do you mean? Or is there a specific thing?
Are we on a merry-go-round about prosecuting political opponents, or whatever you think the broader topic of this is, or the broader principle in dispute here is? The merry-go-round, are we on it now?
I mean, in this very moment, from the top level, we are, because Donald Trump is giving like specific directives to go after Comey and Letitia James and
right.
The other people. Yeah,
that's not a merry-go-round. That's just a horse ride. That's just one. Like, I understood the merry-go-round to be like both sides are doing it, and it's this vicious cycle of like almost Capulet Montague style thing, and it's tit for tat, tit for tat, tit for tat. And I just think I take probably Jesiah's view is that it's been all tat. It's been no tit, only tat, and it's only them.
It's been tits for days.
What you guys are proposing, and you guys obviously disagree, but what you guys are proposing is staying on that merry-go-round.
Well, no, so, we don't think it's political. We don't think it's a political investigation. We think that there are.
Of course, it's political, though. I mean, of course it is. If it's coming as a directive from the president, then of course it is.
It wouldn't be coming as a directive from the president. It would be a promise.
I just disagree with what you're saying.
Let's follow because I want to interrogate that a bit further. So I agree, for all intents and purposes, what the merry-go-round, I think we're effectively already on it. I think through no fault of our own, but we'll get to that. When people ask Trump or the Trump administration about why he's going after X, Y, and Z, what are some of the reasons that they give? Other than mortgage fraud, like what are some of the reasons that they say? There's a specific one I'm looking for.
Can you ask that question one more time? I'm sorry.
When Trump goes after his political opponents, what are some of the reasons that he gives? There's one in particular that I think is super germane.
They did it to us. Correct. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did we do it to them?
No, like there's no we there. I mean, I think like the Bragg prosecution is probably like the weakest case, but as far as like which one was the Bragg one? Was the Stormy Daniels one, right?
Yeah. Well, yes, it's the hush money payment, the one they convicted on. You think that was a political case?
I think that one had like the most political influence. Don't you guys think that? I mean, I think the other ones felt way more like. You know who's a really good example? Stephen A. Smith, the fucking sports guy.
Oh my God! Yeah,
he talks about this shit fucking all the time. Like, but he thinks like he thinks all of those investigations, the way he talks about it, it's like there's this Democratic Party and we all just decided that we were going to prosecute Trump. I fucking fully reject that language. I think the other 3 criminal cases, I think were totally appropriate. I would not say that those were like political prosecutions.
But the New York one wasn't political. Trump tried to corrupt the 2016 election, and he did so in.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even dispute that he committed a crime there. That's not even the point. But I'm just saying, didn't they change the law to alter the statute of?
Oh, God!
That's the MAGA talking point.
Wait! No, but we can't. But I don't want to get dogged down.
Fine. If I'm wrong about that particular point, then that's fine.
No, hang on. When I leave, you guys can hash that sort of stuff out. But let's just follow this for a second. So, okay, Hutch, let's take your answer, which is that maybe some, at least one of the investigations you think could have been tainted by politics or motivated in part by politics, but the other ones were not.
To clarify, I said that was like the weakest of all those cases, and that's like the strongest argument that you could make. However, all of those prosecutors, there's no indication that they were given a directive by the governor, Joe Biden, the political parties. None of that seemed to have been involved at all.
I agree. So we didn't do it to them. We did not do it to them, but they say we did. So here's where I am, and we'll skip to it. The reason that we're on this merry-go-round is because the Trump administration looks at any attempt, and Republicans writ large look at any attempt to hold Donald Trump accountable for anything as politically motivated prosecution. And they take that premise and use it to justify actual political prosecution. So I would argue that the only way to get off the merry-go-round is just to commit to not investigating or holding the Trump administration accountable. Because do you agree that there's no timeline in the multiverse in a President Hutch universe that prosecuting Donald Trump for any reason will be accepted by the Republican Party?
No. So obviously not. They're always going to do that spin. But I hear this argument all the time, and it drives me insane because it sounds like what the argument is. Like, I've heard this argument applied in a different way from lefties who say, well, they're just going to call us socialists anyways, so we might as well be socialists. And I find this argument to be so utterly like uncompelling. Is that a word?
No, but Jesiah's not saying we do political prosecutions. He's not. Right. He doesn't accept that premise.
I agree. Like, there has not been any kind of reporting to suggest that there was any top-down pressure on any of these prosecutors to bring charges. And so the reason why we're on what I'm calling the merry-go-round is the president directing specific prosecutions. And so if yes, they're going to try to spin anything. So if Jack Smith, for example, we do things my way, Newsom doesn't say anything about, I'm going to make sure we go after the previous administration. Jack Smith appoints a special counsel in the first 2 weeks. They announce charges. Of course, the Republicans are going to say that this was directed by Newsom. But you seem to be saying, because they're going to say that anyways, Newsom should just direct it.
Well, no. I don't think that's what Jesiah is saying. I want to be fair. I don't think that's what Jesiah is saying.
How is it not what he's saying? No,
because Jesiah is responding to, I think, your point, which has to do with what you think the likely outcomes will be. That is to say that unless Democrats do stand above, the Republicans won't stop doing X, Y, or Z because they're just going to understand that. But what he's responding to is the notion that Republicans will stop ever. And especially in light of not having political or presidentially directive things, because that wasn't the impetus for them to start in the first place. So given that their whole set of assumptions about political prosecutions and even being in a merry-go-round and saying this is payback is premised on a total confabulation, how can we think in the future it is likely that us taking action and even assuming this was a political prosecution, and we don't accept that it is, even assuming it was, that it would have any effect on their conduct?
Well, I feel like this is like the ultimate black pill then, because if you guys can't imagine a situation where in the future we get back to a place where both parties respect this norm, then it just feels like we're just kind of on this intractable path.
The merry-go-round.
Basically headed towards some kind of a cold or hot civil war.
I think the best way to do it is to punish. I think the best way to get off this merry-go-round is to punish.
But I agree that they should be punished. I just disagree with your assertion that it needs to be said explicitly by the Democratic nominee.
I don't think it needs to.
Totally
I just
agree.
think that it should be.
So let me ask you this, because I want to keep going down this path here. Let's set the hypothetical Newsom or Hutch administrations aside, and let's just go back to Biden.
Mm-hmm.
Set Merrick Garland aside. Let's think about Biden's conduct, the Biden administration's conduct. Do you think they were pretty fastidious when it came to the sort of behavior that you're talking about, Hutch, that you would like Democrats to emulate in the future?
Yeah, they seem to, Biden himself and his administration were signaling, and this was sort of like the promise that he made in 2020 was, I'm going to take us back to normal. And so he, whenever he was asked about Trump's prosecutions, he always did the same thing. Like, I'm not going to involve myself in DOJ, blah, blah, blah.
Did it work?
Well, define work. I mean, he lost the election, obviously, or he had to drop out eventually. And
even just on this discrete issue. Well, no, even on this discrete issue.
On the perceptions of MAGA, et cetera.
Yeah. Or just, let's just say public sentiment, whatever it was. Let's not even just say MAGA. Let's say MAGA and then say the country writ large. You mentioned in part of this conversation, and also I believe in the tweet you sent to me yesterday, is that you're concerned about public perception. My recollection is that public perception wasn't really encouraging about the Justice Department in the Biden years either. Did you have a different recollection, or do you agree that?
Are you basing this off of opinion polls, or I don't?
Yeah.
Sure. I don't recall seeing any opinion polls about like the public perception of DOJ. I don't.
And what's informing your prior about this helping the image of the Department of Justice if you don't have any basis to believe it will? Or do you have a basis?
Because I don't know if I ever said that, but I'm saying like the path to kind of get away from the Trump level corruption is not going to be something that happens overnight. It's going to be something that takes time. Like, it's going to take these institutions and the highest kind of halls of power in the United States, like, I think, like, years to reestablish trust. This is going to be like a multi-year project to potentially, hopefully, get back to, something approaching what we might call normal in the post-Nixon era.
So the polls that I remember about this, the American people were pretty well split. Now, I saw more polls indicating that at least a slight majority or plurality supported most of the prosecutions against Trump than not. Yeah. But it wasn't like 60-40, 70-30, 80-20. And
same with the impeachments.
Right. And some of the polls also indicated the opposite. I think there was like Marquette Law did at one point that I remember from like 2023 or 2024, I think it was. But then when people would ask the questions, were the prosecutions of Trump politically motivated? Even in the polls that showed that there was a slight preference for justification, there was also a majority who were like, yeah, actually, I do think there's a political motivation getting after Trump. So they had mixed feelings. Like, yeah, I think he actually did the fucking crime. But I do think the Biden administration is politically targeting Trump at the same time.
Right.
So the American people have some pretty complicated feelings about this.
Yeah.
But my thought process is Biden did it the way you wanted. And I didn't see like any sort of like serious material benefit to as far as like the prudential outcome,
I
as far as like getting
saying.
Back trust. Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but
do you agree? Will you agree with that?
No, I fully concede that. Yeah. It's something like 55 or 60% of the country thought that those were like entirely politically motivated or some such. That to me is like what I'm getting at, because like I look at that and it really bums me out. Like the fact that, in the context of the Epstein stuff, for example, I'm seeing a lot of commentary from big left-wing pundits that are suggesting that Biden was negligent by not personally directing DOJ to, release the Epstein documents, which in the case of the Ghislaine Maxwell, but the reason why they're saying that is because now they're playing into this kind of new paradigm that has emerged during the Trump era.
No, they've always been like this. I mean, you talked to Kyle and the Vanguard, and they were like, we would want investigations into Manchin's daughter or something in exchange for his vote on minimum wage or something.
No, but come on. But surely you would concede that more people now in the country who probably weren't even aware of these norms now just assume that political influence is a big part of prosecutorial decisions like these. And it's because of Donald Trump.
My suspicion is yes. My suspicion is yes.
Wait, come on.
I don't know if that's the case. That people's ideas about whether about the independence of prosecutions has materially changed since Trump has been in office
Yeah, of course he.
Okay, I'll
I don't
grant that.
know. To
I'll
me,
grant
I
that.
think
I'll grant that. I think that that's probably likely, but I don't understand how that
that
is
really
related to
that
the
really
lefty thing.
that really fucking bums me out, because that, in my opinion, is a really important principle for our, you know, Western
I know, but
liberal
respond to
democracy
Jesiah's
here in
point.
America.
Jesiah's point is, yeah, that was happening.
I did
Let's
though.
say,
I
assume.
did that this. I did. Let me answer
Okay.
the point in two different ways. Okay.
Sure.
The first thing I want to say is if Biden himself had gone up there and, you know, in the early days of his presidency, directed like DOJ or directed Merrick Garland or put that kind of like really explicit public pressure on him, I think that would have hurt Biden significantly. I think that would have hurt potentially his ability to get legislation passed. I think that would have distracted him and caused scandal within his administration that would have hurt his legislative agenda.
I'm not sure about that.
And
Hutch.
then I do.
I don't think the American people
You're-
care that much about it, and it's sad for me too. And I agree that it's sad, and I want to uphold that principle, notwithstanding the fact that I don't think the American people care that much. They voted for Trump again.
I'll actually go one further. I'll back Pisco up here. Here's the reason I'm not convinced, is because Trump was at his nadir of political support at the time. I think if there was any opportunity for a president to say, after January 6th and, you know, fake electors and all this bullshit and Trump corruption, you bet your fucking ass, like, even if you want to go the maximal view, I do expect my Justice Department to investigate this. I think that would have been the time to do it, to garner the most political support, for the same reason, Hutch, that Trump's impeachment in 2026 was the most bipartisan impeachment we'd ever seen in terms of both the impeachment and conviction. Oh, sorry, 2021. I'm fantasizing about a 2026. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. The 2020
there.
Yeah, the 2021 impeachment of Trump was the most bipartisan in terms of both the vote to impeach and the vote to convict.
Mm-hmm.
But you would never have gotten those margins a year later or 2 years later, and certainly not in 2026, right? The reason that there was a permission structure for a sufficient number of Republicans to do what they did was because the American people that was Trump's lowest approval rating. The American people fucking hated him at that point. So I'm not convinced that if Biden 2 weeks later, you know, once he's inaugurated, says, yes, I am appointing an attorney general and I expect him. Yeah, I don't think it would have been more politically harmful. I think that it would have. I think that there's a good argument to be made that would have actually increased support, because he'd pissed off the entire country at that point.
I wouldn't have supported it, Hutch. I would have been against it. I would have said that that's impeachable. I would have said that that's fucked up for him to say, I'm appointing you specifically so you charge Donald Trump. I don't think that that's right to do. I would uphold it, but I'm just agreeing with Jesiah's point, which is I don't think the American people care that much about this prudentially. And if they do care about it, they're already going to vote for Democrats.
I don't understand what this you guys are treating this like conventional wisdom, and I just don't really understand what it's based on. Like, you know, obviously the Republican propaganda efforts to, you know, paint all of Trump's criminal prosecutions as politically influenced, obviously that was successful in that, you know, either a plurality or majority of Americans seem to agree with them. And you guys seem to think that if Biden himself would have just come out and said the thing, or I guess Jesiah, if he would have just come out and said the thing, that we wouldn't have seen way larger numbers. Maybe that 55% jumps up to like 75, 80, 90%, because now Biden is just coming out and saying it. And if you think that that's not going to distract him from a legislative agenda when he has zero margin of error in the Senate, or if you think that's not,
we're not
gonna,
making
like,
that claim. We're not making that claim that it wouldn't distract, or that it wouldn't cause other things. Or I just think in terms of the public perception, I'm not convinced that it would be so detrimental to that. It might distract. It might do,
especially early on. Especially early on. I want to be clear.
Significantly, you don't think the numbers would go up?
Especially early on. I want to be clear. I think Joe Biden coming out in May 2024, you know, saying "fuck yeah," because he actually had that like little gaffe or whatever. He's like, "We should lock him out," and then he grabs the microphone again and he goes, "Lock him out politically." I mean, politically, the one time Biden slipped. Yeah, I think at that point, if he's campaigning on "fuck yeah," we'll prosecute Donald Trump. After 2 or 3 years of the American people forgetting about all the shit that Trump did and having a more distant view, yes, I think that would have been probably politically toxic. I'm talking about 2 weeks after January 6th, when Biden is freshly inaugurated. I think him, you know, publicly, you know, saying that he expects his Justice Department to immediately, you know, begin investigation into January 6th and follow the facts without fear or favor, even if they lead to Donald Trump saying something to that effect? No, I don't
think it would be
that would
insulated.
hurt him
I think it would be
politically.
more insulated
Yeah.
than what actually happened, where it's almost it's weird, Hutch. It's counterintuitive, but it's the same way that Trump can appear to be more corrupt facially and just like honest about like, we want the oil, but he doesn't get hit as much with like the Bush, oh, they invaded Iraq for oil, even when he says it. There's something about like the hidden aspect or the hidden like, oh, we're revealing something that for whatever reason, people don't care about like the open outright corruption. They like, I don't know why that is. I don't know why.
People do care, by the way.
care.
People do care about Trump's corruption.
But no, they do, but
absolutely
they don't care. But to Pisco's point, they don't care at the rate. They don't care at a rate which is proportional to the corruption. And let me give you an example. So did you know? I religiously tracked the polls like during the 2-year-long impeachment effort into President Biden. The American people were obsessed about Hunter Biden. They knew fucking everything about that guy. And the polls were really, really bad. In fact, there were some polls which say, actually, I do think that Trump or that President Biden pulled strings to benefit his son and all this, all this shit. And so the perception of corruption on Biden and Trump is generally considered to be more corrupt, but it's relatively close, when you consider the margins. Yeah.
I don't know. I think Donald Trump's numbers currently and the electoral results recently reflect not just disgust with ICE, but the disgust of corruption. Like I think the public is more aware of his corruption than they were certainly like the first term, and I think it is pissing them off. Let me ask you guys a question. Hang on. If you and I don't know, maybe there's a poll out there that dived into this particular topic, but if you were to ask the American people, if you were to propose two different things, but which do you think the American public would prefer more, my way or your way? Like, do you think that if you ask them, do you want to see like prosecutorial instructions or investigative, like instructions on investigations? Like, do you want that to be completely free from political influence, or do you think the president should have the right to direct DOJ?
If you phrase it like,
I think, especially if you frame it like that, yeah.
Then
frame it a
I think
different
it'd be 80-20. I think it'd be 80-20 in your favor. Yeah.
Well, frame it a different way then.
Here's how I frame it. Well, should the president investigate the Trump's order the Department of Justice to investigate the corruption of Trump? I think that you would get a majority on that.
I think that if you gave them an alternative, should the president stay out of those kinds of decisions, that more people would favor my proposition.
Right, but they're not getting faced with that decision when they're told the rhetoric. It's not like they're considering both. They're just responding, reacting to one. It's not like, hey guys, would you rather hear this or that? It's like a focus group. They're just hearing one. And to be clear, I don't think that he should be ordering.
Is the preference that people have, though. When people talk about how, like 60% of the public think that, Trump's prosecutions were politically motivated, they're saying that in a disapproving way. They're communicating to pollsters that they don't like political influence in these kinds of. Now, whether or not it's true, that's a different discussion altogether. But Americans broadly don't like the idea of politically influenced,
and yet they supported the charges,
prosecutions,
and yet they supported the charges by a slight majority. That's the
I
American.
feel like that's
how you phrase the question, and it's a way of saying the American people are willing to abide some political influence into the DOJ prosecutions, and even support certain prosecutions in light of that. Now, that said, I don't agree with political prosecutions, and I don't say that what I'm suggesting would amount to political prosecutions or political directives. And that's ultimately, I think, where the big disagreement is I view the kind of, hey, we're going to investigate the previous government's corruption as equivalent to,
but it's not
we're going to investigate the mafia. That's what it means.
Why is it we? Why is it we? We are going to investigate Donald Trump.
My administration, my Department of Justice.
But there goes the fucking independent DOJ then, right? So I guess that's just how people gone.
That's just how people talk. I'm sorry. Yeah, I agree. It's not his lawyers. I agree.
The language is important. The language is actually really important.
I know, but I'm trying to say, the point I'm making is I'm not actually co-signing political prosecutions. I'm not actually co-signing political prosecutions. What I'm saying is, I think the president should make it clear that my attorney general will look into corruption of the previous administration. And I don't think that's like saying my attorney general is going to look into the mafia. To me, it's the same thing.
But it's not.
I've got a question for you, Hutch.
Not the same thing, though. Yeah, go ahead.
I've got a question for you, baby. Listen to this one. Okay. President Hutch appoints Attorney General Jack Smith. Jack Smith comes to President Hutch, the Oval Office, and says, "Sir, I I've decided not to investigate the Trump administration for anything. Does President Hutch fire Jack Smith? He doesn't say, I have looked into this and I've decided that there's no case I can make beyond all reasonable doubt. He just makes the decision to not investigate at all.
I would fire him because that would be a politically motivated decision. Like if he went to, now this would be a different thing altogether.
Assume it's not.
No, if he says no, but that's what he said though. Jesiah said he just made the choice to just not even look.
Assume it's not political. Make it harder for yourself.
I don't know why you would do, but I don't know why you would do that. Political then.
He says, well, the more important thing from a prosecutor perspective is to go after these drug importers. They just have he for whatever reason he gets obsessed with the drug importers.
Yeah,
he gets obsessed with whatever. He gets obsessed with fraud and stuff that's not related to the government. And so he's just like, listen, as a prosecutorial matter, the Department of Justice is not going to look into that. We are worried more about fentanyl deaths in America than that. And so that's what we're going to do. Just assume for the sake of the hypothetical, don't fight it. If that happened, would you fire him? I think the answer is yes, on policy grounds.
I think but again, on broad policy grounds, like if you're not taking actions that I think are sufficient to address government corruption at the highest level, then I think that there's like a policy justification there. But I want to flip it back around on you, because what happens if Gavin Newsom, for example, says, using your language, Pisco, my administration is going to investigate the previous administration? What if he says that, and then his attorney general comes back and says, look, we found a lot of evidence, but we don't think that we have enough to convict in a criminal trial?
Yeah.
What do you do at that point?
Yeah, I would think that firing after that basis would be corrupt. I would be against firing.
But that's why you don't use that language, because then you don't have to be in that spot. Like
I said, investigate. No, stop. I said investigate. Well, didn't I say? And if I didn't say this, I'm sorry. I thought in our language we said I'm not going to get involved into the individual charging or non-decisions, but I will appoint. We will fight this sort of corruption, and I will appoint someone who's going to look into it. I thought that I said that, and if I changed the language and said something like charge or something, I'm sorry. I take that back. I thought we made that clear initially, but let me know if I didn't.
But again, you can just. I keep circling back around. Like you can get all the things that you can get all the things that you're asking for, plus putting us on a path towards reestablishing public trust in these institutions by doing it my way. And by doing it your way, you're continuing to erode the trust of the American people. I think you guys are speaking to the desires of the Democratic voter base at the detriment of the Democratic Party's relationship with independent voters. Like there are a lot of Americans in this country that do care about this norm and want to see us return to this norm. And I want to be the party that commits to just doing that.
Yeah, I do too. That's why I don't think I'm violating the norm. I don't think I'm violating the norm.
That is going to take years to reestablish that trust. It's not going to happen overnight. And yeah, the double standards are insane. But Jesiah, I brought it up in our conversation. When I look at the Trump administration now, that is not something that I want to emulate. I don't think that these political prosecutions. Well, I think that by, would Barack Obama have used this language? Would Bill Clinton? Would George W. Bush?
I don't understand how that's relevant to the.
Barack Obama was asked about like prosecuting previous administration officials, and he was that guy that was saying,
I just view that as
to turn the page.
I just view that as not responsive. The question isn't whether Obama would have said it or whether another president would have said it. The question is, would it, if true, if said, be the same thing or the same type of thing as Trump? And I think the answer to that is a no.
Well, no, the question is like the question is what you guys are proposing a violation of norms that existed for decades in the post-Nixon era?
My answer is no.
I think it is. Like obviously, when you have the president saying that my administration will investigate like this specific group of people, the Trump administration,
the mafia,
what other presidents after Nixon did anything like this? Besides Trump.
Didn't the Kennedys say like we're gonna look into fraud and like organized labor? We're gonna like that's how I view it.
As Kennedy predates Nixon though.
Yeah, well, he views it as a.
What are you talking about?
Oh, sorry. Post Nixon.
After Nixon, we established norms to insulate the Justice Department from political influence from the executive branch. That's what happened in the wake of Nixon in a slew of reforms that were passed through the Congress and at the executive level through policy. And that existed up until Trump came along. He's the first president in decades to directly, to give these kinds of directives to DOJ. The last person before him that did it
I'm not
was
proposing
Nixon.
directives. I understand a directive to be an order.
You say that, but you are.
So I understand.
You say that, but you
So
are.
I understand a directive to mean an order. Do you have a different understanding of what directive means?
You can, well, there's a directive, but then there's also like I'm saying political influence. Like if you yourself, the president, is politically influencing, using your political power to influence DOJ to go after specific people, that, again, Trump is the only person post-Nixon who has done that. And what you're suggesting would be a continuation of this kind of new norm where now the president is publicly pressuring the DOJ to take specific actions against specific people. That would be the Democratic Party continuing.
That's exactly what I'm not doing, right? So I'm not doing that. First, it's not political because it's not on the basis of politics that we're doing this. We're not doing it because they're Trump supporters. We're doing it because crimes were committed. On the norm, specifically on interference in the president, I agree that's an important norm, regardless of whether it's political or not. I want to be clear, regardless of whether it's political or not, the president's interference directly into individual charging decisions or specific investigations, I think that is a very good norm to uphold. And I don't think it's a violation of that norm either, because I construe, investigate the previous administration for crime and corruption. I construe that to be a policy directive, not one about individual prosecutions or interference. And it doesn't entail orders or directives. What I understand a directive to be is to be an order, an interference to be some sort of communication while the respective parties are in office to do a particular thing or to highly suggest to do a particular thing.
I've got a question for actually both of you. Pisco, I want to start with you first, actually. Let's piggyback off Hutch's hypothetical, and let's say the Attorney General, the next Attorney General says, Mr. President, I did look into the allegations of corruption against Donald Trump, the Trump family, the Trump administration, and I don't believe in any of these instances we can secure a prosecution or a successful conviction beyond all reasonable doubt. But let's say the Deputy Attorney General, the Solicitor General disagree. So the number 2 and number 3 at the DOJ say, Mr. President, Mr. Attorney General, with all due respect, we disagree with the Attorney General on this. We do think that there are colorable cases that can be secured beyond all reasonable doubt. Would it still be corrupt to fire the Attorney General in those instances, or in that instance?
I think it would violate the norm I'm talking about, which is to insulate from political interference. And I think at best, maybe the president would say, listen, I'm not going to get involved in this decision, and I'm not going to make personnel decisions about it. This is a decision for you guys to resolve internally on the charging decision. If you feel like you need to appoint a special counsel, you can do that. But I'm not going to weigh in on that. I think that would be the appropriate.
And I understand, but I guess because to me, that was the more interesting thing. Like, what if you come with a situation where the number 2 and number 3 disagree with the judgment of number 1?
Yeah, then the norm there is
would it
political.
still be corrupt?
Yeah, okay, so there's 2 norms here, and so don't get distracted, guys. And this is for the chat as well.
Yeah.
There's the norm of political interference and political investigatory steps or charging decisions, one or the other. That's one norm, and that's never okay, right? Never okay to have a political prosecution like that. Then there's a second norm of individual interference from the president, except in certain exceptions, into charging decisions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's 2 norms. So that in that situation, I think there's a tangible good argument that it's not politically motivated if he were to fire the Attorney General on the basis because you have 2 other opinions, right? And so there's at least a law enforcement rationale for a firing there. However, in that situation, the second norm is at play, which is the interference by directives and firing on the basis of one versus the other on a charging decision for which there is a basis to insulate from presidential review.
So less corrupt, but still corrupt in your mind.
Yes,
would that be too reductive to say? Okay.
That would be. I would consider that corrupt in the norm.
Okay. And then Hutch, here's my question for you. Because I want to make sure I got this right. How important is it for the next Democrat or the President Newsom or the President Hutch administration to restore public trust in DOJ?
Very important.
Is that
very, very important?
Do you expect your Attorney General to act in a way to do that?
Yeah, I would want to, like, my standard, if I was a president deciding who to nominate for AG, I would want somebody that I felt full confidence would follow the letter of the law investigate the facts as they arise, and to make decisions that are free from any kind of political influence. So if that means prosecuting Cuellar in Texas and Menendez in Illinois, is that what, or Indiana, wherever state he served? Was he New York?
Menendez was New Jersey.
New Jersey, yeah.
Or Mayor Adams.
Then so be it.
Yeah.
Or, DOJ, we found out recently that had investigated Ilhan Omar for campaign spending and these kinds of things. So that's what I would, that's the standard that I would want for my attorney general. And that also includes Trump, right? If they discover crimes.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Okay, so there was reporting at the time that part of Merrick Garland's unease about investigating Trump is that it would be seen to look political and cause further distrust in the Justice Department. So here's my hypothetical. Attorney General Pisco comes to President Hutch and says, Mr. President, I know you didn't ask for this report, but I feel like I owe you an explanation. We did investigate the Trump administration, and we do believe that we do see evidence of crimes committed. But you appointed me, at least in part, with the mission of restoring public trust in the DOJ. And I believe that if we prosecute Donald Trump or the Trump administration, it will further erode trust in the Justice Department, which is already fragile. So I have made the choice to not prosecute or to not proceed with prosecutions.
I mean, in my view, that's corruption. So I would see a justification to fire the attorney general in that spot. But my motivation in that moment would not be because I'm pissed that Donald Trump is not going to go to prison. My motivation would be, I view that to be corrupt. I don't think that those kinds of political considerations should influence.
So in other words,
decision.
You would tell him, no, you need to follow the facts and leave the politics to me. And if the facts say Trump committed crimes and you can prove it, you fucking prosecute him. You don't choose not to prosecute him for political considerations. If it erodes the trust in the Justice Department, that's my problem. Not yours.
Yeah. And just flip it, right? Like if your attorney general said, like I found, criminal behavior with Ilhan Omar, but I'm not going to choose to press charges. It's the same logic. I view those things to be equally corrupt, just facing different.
Yeah, no. Well, I think the logic of the Garland Justice Department was, and understandably so from just a realpolitik perspective, which is, I think that he was less hesitant to prosecute Democrats. As a matter of fact, Dan Abrams, who is like a News Nation legal analyst, and he was like the founder of Media, he did a breakdown of this. This has been the thing that he's been complaining about for the longest time, that the Biden Justice Department actually prosecuted more elected Democrats than elected Republicans, and did so quicker than elected Republicans. They launched investigations much more quickly into President Biden and Hunter Biden than they did Donald Trump. And the reporting was at the time that Garland was less uncomfortable about prosecuting his own people than the opposing team, because the thought process is, they're going to be just more distrustful if I go after a political opponent than if I go after somebody on my side. So, but that's why I was curious. Like, if you get into a situation where an attorney general says, yeah, we believe there's evidence of crimes committed, but pursuing those crimes, prosecuting those crimes will further erode trust in the Justice Department. You said that that's a top priority. What would you want your attorney general to do? That's why I asked.
Yeah, I think I answered your question there. But
yeah.
So. I mean, I think maybe the issue here is, like, my issue with Pisco is that we just disagree about what qualifies as, political pressure or corrupt kind of like political pressure. Yeah. And then Jessiah, you seem to take a more kind of explicit view that they should just come out and say the thing in no uncertain terms. Maybe I'm misreading that, but that seems to be the source of the disagreement here.
I think we have a disagreement about whether what we're suggesting constitutes making the individualized decisions that is in violation of the. I view it more akin to, let's go after Al Qaeda for crimes, let's go after the mafia for crimes, and you view it more as lock him up, or something approaching that. I think that is going to.
Well, you can, but I think you can get at what you're wanting, just with more generalized language that is not as, in my view, problematic. Like, you can say, I want my attorney general to crack down on government corruption at the federal level. And if you appoint Jack Smith as AG and fucking like Ryan Kinzinger or whatever as deputy AG or like FBI director, then you are sending a very clear signal to not only your base but the public that you're addressing like their concerns and anger about criminal corruption at the federal level, but you just don't get into specific language.
I understand that I can say those things, but I think I've explained why I think it's preferable say what I'm saying, and that includes not just because I want. I think all else equal, it will have a slight benefit to the electoral chances, because I think it unchains the candidate to speak openly and frankly and like a populist about giving back to the American people, because I think it's a more likelihood that he will actually follow through and that the actions, if taken, will have democratic legitimacy. And you'll be able to say, well, look, he said he was going to do this, and the American people gave it its sign of approval. And yeah, so I understand that I could not do it, or I could not suggest it, but I do think it's preferable.
Yeah, but I view that kind of pressure as corrupt. Like, I view that as corrupt. I think you don't know why. Like, I don't think these kinds of decisions should come from the president. That should just simply come from the attorney general. The president can make their preferences.
You agree it's
known
policy
in terms
decisions.
of like what kind
can
of
be. You agree policy
no,
can
but
be.
we totally disagree on how you seem to characterize this as like a policy decision, but it's a specific investigation, like pressure campaign to specifically investigate particular people. That's not a policy directive. That's just a directive. A policy directive
it's not a directive at all.
Organized crime.
It really is not a directive at all, because it's not an order, and a directive is an order. And you agree with that? I'm not suggesting that the president order the attorney general do anything.
Right, but you don't need to get at corruption with only explicit.
You agree
sort
it's
of
not an
orders.
order?
Yes, that's what I do. Also, yes, I agree that it's not a specific order, but the reason, like the norms also dictate that the president use language to make sure that there's not even like a reasonable perception that that's what's going on. So that's why you use that language.
I don't think it's a reasonable perception.
If the public, do you guys disagree that if the public perceives that the president has influenced the decision to investigate the Trump administration, that's going to hurt the public confidence in those investigations?
I'm not sure about that. I'm not convinced. But again, the question is about reasonable perceptions, and I don't think that. Wait. Let me.
Sure.
I just want to.
Really not sure about that.
I do want to just finish my thought real quick. So I'm not sure whether or not a potential candidate saying that we want to look into the corruption of the previous administration will cause the confidence in the Department of Justice to go down. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that claim. So I did answer the question. I'm not sure about that claim, and you're going to have to provide evidence, I think, to say that, like, that's obviously stupid. I want to finish what I want to say now. Okay? Regardless of whether or not it causes confidence to go one way or the other, the question regarding the norm is about reasonable beliefs. And it did cause the investigations against Trump in term or post-term one, the confidence or the belief in those political prosecutions went up. However, that was not a reasonable belief. And because it was not a reasonable belief, it wasn't incumbent upon the administration to refrain from it or cancel the prosecutions once they were considered by the public to be political. So it's not about whether or not public opinion will shift. The norm relates to reasonable beliefs. And there's no reasonable belief in that circumstance that it was political. And
I've got to follow up on that to Hutch, if I may.
I want to pause on that though. Like the question was, if the public believes, like very broadly, that a charging decision or a decision to investigate if the public believes that was a top-down influenced situation coming from the president, my question was, do you think that that's going to hurt the public's trust in those investigations? To say I don't know I'm struggling with that one. Of course,
Why are you struggling?
Would really, because it's obvious. It's obvious, like the perception that Biden influenced the criminal investigations into Donald Trump, founded or unfounded, the perception of that in the public was like one of the reasons why Trump was able to like leverage that moment to make himself a martyr and then like catapult to an easy primary victory. And it wasn't just Republicans who had that perception. So
it was the fact of the matter. So it was the fact of the matter that Trump was being prosecuted at all, right? That is what eroded.
Yeah, exactly.
That eroded public trust in the DOJ. The fact that he was being prosecuted.
No, but I'm talking about people that thought like that this was something like a top-down directive, like Biden directed Bragg and Fani Willis and Jack Smith to like do these things. That perception did damage the public's trust in the institution. That, of course, was ill-founded. It was totally unfounded. There was no basis whatsoever that Biden himself personally involved. But in the alternative universe where Biden just came out and said, he wants these criminal investigations done and I think those numbers would have been even worse. And I think Donald Trump would have won that election by even larger margins.
Okay. I don't have a reason to believe that. And I don't have a reason to believe that. I'm just being honest with you. I don't have a reason to believe that. And it seems like
you don't have a reason to believe that the public reject political influence of that nature when it comes to criminal investigations. Like, of course they have a negative. I
don't have a reason to believe that in the context in which Biden says, I'm glad that my administration is looking into Jan 6 crimes, including those by the president, that would materially affect the polling with respect to whether it's political. I don't have a basis to believe. What is your basis to believe it? It's obvious. It's so obvious.
It's obvious to me that the public totally rejects like political directives from like a top-down kind of structural kind of thing, like a governor instructing the attorney general to investigate, a member of the opposing party, or a president instructing the attorney general to go after members of the previous administration. These are just inherently corrupt things. I guess we disagree there.
Well,
Jessiah,
I'm not proposing that any directive be taken, and I don't believe that anything I've done has violated the norm.
I'm speaking to Jessiah there.
Okay.
Well, what I was going to say was, and I'm curious what you think is the meaningful difference here. I mean, Trump has run 3 presidential campaigns and got elected twice, and in all of them, he was campaigning on jailing his political opponents.
How did that work out for him and the Republican Party?
He got elected twice.
But do you think that the Republican Party has been in an especially healthy place over the last 10 years? Because he won in 2016 and 2020.
They're getting their policy goals.
The Democrats have had more winning election cycles than the Republicans during the Trump era. They had 2 winning election cycles. We had 3. We are cruising towards a blue fucking tsunami in November, and I think we're cruising towards a blowout.
Don't count your chickens before they hatch.
In 2028. I mean, listen, anything can happen, whatever. But the current trajectory that we're on right now, the Republican Party is the weakest in my lifetime by far right now. I was born in 1983. What was another time that do you think for the Republican Party was weaker than they are right now? Maybe your strongest case would be 2008. Maybe. Because that was a pretty big election. We got 60 Senate seats. But apart from that, in the time that I've been alive, this is the weakest that they've ever been, with Donald Trump at the helm. So them winning 2 elections, to me, is not enough to say, well, they haven't paid a price for Trump's corruption.
Josiah's point is that it wasn't a humongous issue that prevented Trump from being elected. There's no reason to believe that it's on top of people's agendas, and to the extent that it is, it's overdetermined. They're going to vote for Democrats. People for whom corruption is their number one issue, they're going to vote for Democrats.
I think there was perceived corruption with Hillary Clinton, first of all, and that severely damaged her in 2016. And so that was, I think 2016 was a populist wave where a lot of American voters, I think, made dumb decisions. But the perception there was that Hillary Clinton herself was corrupt and that she was above the law by not being prosecuted by the FBI. And in 2024, I think that we can very accurately and succinctly describe the 2024 election as being primarily driven about economics.
I don't think this will affect the disposition of the election. I really don't think it will affect the outcome in a material way. To the extent that it will, again, my intuition is that it opens up the candidate to be able, frankly and honestly. And for example, Hutch, you would say if asked the question, well, I don't actually know this. If asked the question, hey, will you direct your Department of Justice to investigate the previous administration? Your answer would be no. What if they asked you straight up, do you think Trump committed crimes? Do you think that the administration has committed crimes? Do you think it was murder when they killed those Venezuelans? Do you think that they're covering up a murder of Alex Preddy, etc.? How would you answer?
I think candidate Newsom would have. I think candidate Newsom would have leeway to say, of course, I think that the administration has committed open crimes. As soon as he becomes president-elect or President Newsom, that's when you got to do the switch up and say, I'm not going to comment on DOJ matters.
This is the follow-up, right? So you're
that line.
Right. So imagine you're a candidate, and I'm not talking about a president. You're a candidate Newsom. You're like, I think they committed crimes. And then the follow-up is, so wouldn't your administration want to investigate crimes? And you would say,
well, that's why I plan to appoint an attorney general that will follow the facts and prosecute government corruption whenever they find it.
yeah, but
There
you're
you
like
go.
you're
Bing,
like
bang, boom.
signaling the same thing with the same signal
Right,
that you
yeah.
the same signal that you say is like a violation of the norm. Put it aside the public
No, I
perception
don't
of
think
it.
that. Again, I've been advocating for a policy of dog whistling the whole time. Like you can do subtle.
Oh,
dog
so then you don't
whistles.
have a
can do
problem.
kind of like,
So you have no problem with a candidate intentionally sending the message that they want to investigate the prior administration, and therefore, I hope you would grant that if you're convinced that that's their intent, it's not a norm violation. Is a norm violation just to say it, not to mean it?
The norm violation is like any kind of statement that would suggest that the DOJ is following the president's like directives or influence in terms of specific charging decisions. That's
what a
the
dog
norm.
whistle is. Wait, that's what a dog whistle is. You just said it was a dog whistle.
But you can, again, the language really matters.
What if the language?
And again,
sorry.
the candidate, like if Newsom is the candidate in that moment, then that is a different context. The dynamic completely flips once they become president-elect and then ultimately president. When that happens, you do have to say, I am not going to comment on specific like charging decisions by DOJ. They're gonna operate independently, and I'm not gonna tell them how to run the DOJ.
What if the language is, and maybe we've covered this, I can't remember. I'm just trying to come up with permutations that of a commitment that you might find palatable. What about my attorney general? I will appoint an attorney general who is committed, among other things, to investigating and prosecuting public corruption, no matter where the facts lead. Republican Party, Democratic Party, senator, congressman, ex-president, any administration, including the previous Trump administration.
No one
What
is
if they
above
said
the
something
law.
about that?
No one is above the law. Like I feel like Biden said this probably when he was campaigning in 2020.
But like the way I said it, where you do say Republican and you do say Trump administration,
You're kind of walking up to the line, but I still would probably consider that to be like acceptable. But again, I think any language that the president uses about specific like DOJ investigations should always be framed as I'm not going to involve myself in that kind of way. I'm not going to tell them who to train their sights on.
Right. But here's the issue with that, Hutch, and I this will be my last statement on it because I think we've covered the ground sufficiently. But there is a large possibility that because of additional corruption and abuse of power, that the members of the administration who would like to charge and hold accountable are beyond the reach of the current law as it is. And then the president will need to take a role in having accountability to propose either legislation, amendments, etc., policy solutions to accountability. So to the extent that DOJ criminal prosecution is not available and the investigation on that ground won't happen, he's going to need to stay apprised enough to offer structural forms to address that criminality. And that necessarily, I think, requires him, from a policy perspective, from a top-down perspective, keeping his ear to it and having an opinion on it. In this context, right, with the pardons that are almost certainly coming from members of the administration.
I don't think that would violate the norm that I'm talking about, though.
Okay.
Because he would be acting well within his, like there's nothing untoward about a president proposing like legislation to, I guess what you're saying, like reform, I guess hypothetically political pardons, I guess, or or propose a constitutional amendment.
For example, propose legislation to adjust qualified immunity to the extent that the Supreme Court interprets absolute immunity from a statutory perspective or something. Propose legislation.
Yeah, you can do that.
Go for it.
You can do that, and then the ball's in the AG's court, right? Like you can do that without instructing AG. Okay, now that I've done this thing, you got to do this thing over here.
Propose section
that would
3,
be a violation of the norm.
Propose section 3 enforcement. Propose
I don't
section 3
I don't know section 3.
Implementing legislation to disqualify people on the basis of violations of Section 3, January 6th. Proposing, like, for example, an amendment to this is what I don't know if this would ever work. This is what I would support. I would support an amendment that undoes all of Trump's pardons. Supporting action, for example, to make the availability of trying to criminally prosecute people who have been pardoned under color of law from the previous administration when he doesn't currently occupy the office because he's not lawfully in office because of Section 3 having not been enforced properly in the previous administration. So there's a lot of ways in which I think the president, from a policy perspective, is allowed to weigh in without violating the norm. You've agreed with some of these things that I've said. I think one such thing is not to say, hey, I want to order investigations, because I don't think he should do that, but to say, I want to appoint someone who cares about holding the previous administration's corruption to justice. And I think that is an example of something that is not a norm violation.
I think once you use that language explicitly, you lose the confidence of, I would say, probably a lot of Americans who otherwise might be on board with accountability. But as soon as you say it like that, you're going to lose probably millions of Americans.
I don't know why.
But I would oppose that for different reasons. Okay, I would oppose that for pragmatic reasons, because there's no way he's going to have the kind of mandate to pass a constitutional amendment to do that. So I would not advocate for.
Sure. I'm just talking about the things that would not be norm violations. I'm just advocating for things that, like,
no, I don't think that would be a violation of the norm. As long as the ball's just in the AG's court at that point, and you're not like calling up Jack Smith and saying, okay, I got that fucking amendment passed, so you got to pull through on your end. That would be the violation of the norm.
Yeah.
Or some kind of like public pressure campaign against
I'm glad I'm not proposing that, and I don't think Jessiah is either.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a good discussion. Yeah.
It is a good discussion. What if President Hutch sets the priority that he does not want the DOJ to make their priority federal marijuana violations? And Attorney General Pisco comes back and says, Mr. President, I understand that, but I actually do think that the priority, or a priority, should be enforcing federal marijuana law. So
the president can just direct the DOJ, do not prosecute like low-level marijuana offenses or something like that. That's policy. That's a broader policy.
I understand, but just to be clear, you would fire an AG who disobeyed you in that respect.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I'm just sussing out in real time where your lines are.
No, we know the line. The line is it a policy directive that's not interference to appoint someone who the president feels will go after corruption specifically of the previous administration? And I think that it's not. And I don't think it's a policy. I think it is a policy related action, especially to promise.
You guys can't imagine what the fucking commentary would look like if Newsom said, I expect my attorney general to look into the previous administration.
Yeah,
you guys can't just imagine what that would look like.
Look at the level
don't give a fuck.
Look at the level of criminality. Yes, you guys should. So I would be like, guys, look at what Newsom is saying. Newsom is promising justice. He's promising justice. He's going to appoint someone who's good to look into the corruption. That would be based.
But you guys pointed out that a slight majority of people supported the criminal investigations into Donald Trump. I think each one individually had popular support, just barely. It's like, I think you said it was like 50 to 55%. My recollection is correct or similar. And you guys also acknowledged that even larger number of Americans thought that those had like political influence. And so and they didn't like that.
Yeah, there's an unfortunate conclusion there, Hutch. And the unfortunate conclusion is they don't give that much of a shit about it.
Well, I think that I don't know. I'm not following your logic because you guys acknowge that.
They support the prosecutions, notwithstanding them believing that it's political. And
do you think that the Stephen A. Smiths and all that commentary about political influence?
I think they're two IQ losers.
Right, but there's no question that commentary impacted how the electorate felt about these investigations, negatively impacted the way that they felt about those investigations. But you're also suggesting that if Biden himself would have come out and said that he wanted Merrick Garland to pursue the Trump administration, that wouldn't have been like considerably worse in terms of perception. And you're also making a separate argument that maybe that's true, maybe that's not, but the public frankly doesn't even care all that much. But I see all of these things as like death by 1,000 cuts.
Right,
and I want to do what I can as a political party. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is shout out to, I disavowed Doobie, but I shout out to his question. It made me think about it. The next Democratic president is asked, will you continue to investigate those associated with the Epstein file? You say?
I am the president of the United States. I am not the attorney general of the Department of Justice. I have full confidence in my Justice Department that they will pursue crimes if they are discovered in the course of their investigations. But I do not investigate particular people for particular things. That is the job of the Justice Department.
I think we disagree on whether that answer would be favorably by people, whether it would constitute a violation of the norm to be like, we will appoint an AG who will care about this kind of corruption, including the Epstein stuff, and they will give more transparency than this administration gave. You can bet on that. I think that would be a good answer.
Presidents don't investigate people. We need to start conditioning people to get back in that kind of thinking. Like, I get so bummed when I hear these kinds of questions. I think it's like the question themselves shows us how far we've fallen here in these hallowed United States of America. That people are asking, like, will a president investigate this or that person?
Oh, I will appoint an AG. I will appoint an AG for whom it's a priority to get to the bottom of corruption, including anything related to the Epstein files that hasn't been disclosed. And you'll get more disclosure from this administration than you will get from a Vance administration, because they try to cover it up. What's wrong with that answer?
I don't know if I have like too much of an issue with that answer, but I think you're getting into like dangerous territory as soon as you start weighing in on particular investigations. That is the norm. I keep trying to say this to you guys. That is the norm that emerged from the post-Nixon consensus in America, is that presidents don't investigate this or that thing. The DOJ operates independently. That's what, and I thought you guys liked that norm.
We don't think it
violates. Because you guys said
that
in the beginning of this conversation. Hold on, I'm just gonna give me literally 30 seconds. I'm gonna go get water.
Yeah, I think that we've run the DOJ thing, and even on our disagreement there, I don't think it's like it's whether you should dog whistle it or whether you should be a little bit more direct. I mean, that's ultimately the question, and whether we think either that difference bears on the public's perception or on the actual violation of a norm. And we have a disagreement.
I mean, White House has their own counsel that advise them on these kinds of things. Like the independent nature of the DOJ, for example, is the reason why special counsel exists. To make sure that there's like no appearance of political influence. That's why Merrick Garland appointed Jack Smith in the first place. So, my question to you guys would be, using your language, what do you think like Barack Obama's White House counsel would advise if he was asked questions about particular people or investigations?
He would say things like the following.
Advise?
Yeah. They would say like, listen, I can't get into the specifics of particular investigations, but you should know that any attorney general that we're going to do is going to do X, Y, Z. And for us, this kind of shit is a big deal. And it includes this and that. Now, Obama wasn't presented with the fact pattern of Trump. And so if Obama was running this time, I think that there's no question that he would say, my attorney general will be looking into potential corruption from the.
I don't think he would say that. No, I think Obama is an institutionalist. I think he values that norm, principally values it. And I think that White House counsel would have told him to not weigh in on that particular thing.
And if he would say that as a surrogate, if he says that as a surrogate, that won't prove it, because that's just him speaking as Obama, not as...
as a surrogate, he can say whatever the fuck he wants. Okay. Like, I'm telling you, like...
Yeah, but he's talking about the candidate.
There's no way... I understand that, but I'm saying, like, if Obama were to come out now and be like, we need to hold these people accountable, including by criminal investigated, that wouldn't prove my point, or it wouldn't disprove you, because it wouldn't be him as candidate there. I'm just looking at like...
Right, yeah, no, he can say that now. That's fine. I would think it would be based if he said that.
I think we've laid it out.
Yeah, I think we have. Yeah. Well, listen.
Yeah, you guys want to shatter liberal norms, and I'm, the last vanguard standing on the wall and defending liberals.
You are the vanguard. But you know what? The comparisons between you and the vanguard. Yes. I'm glad you're the third member of the vanguard.
Yeah. Oh, but it's funny you say that though, because like I'm still on the hill of the Hunter Biden pardon was corrupt. I'm still defending Merrick Garland from baseless attacks, I think, from certain people. And so whatever your view of it is, you might disagree with the application of the norm. You can't say that I don't care about the norm. I understand it. Because I'm taking these.
I'm teasing. You obviously think that what you're proposing doesn't violate the norm. I do. That's the big disagreement.
Yeah. I think that's right. Jessiah, you can stick around for the other part of the conversation if you want. I mean, that's up to you. Would you like to?
I refuse to accept your. Your thinly veiled.
He loves it.
Your thinly Look at how much he loves. Get the fuck out of here.
No,
you're thinly veiled. Get the fuck out. You know what's funny? I remember visiting Pisco in New York, and he said something similar as he held the door open to his palatial condo. He held the door. He's like, Jessiah, you and your wife are free to continue to hang out with me, as he's ushering us towards the door. I remember that.
Jessiah,
that's cool.
I would prefer if you stay. I would love to have you, because I know that you have a view on it, but I'm offering that to you. I don't know if you want the heat of
I appreciate that. No,
I actively prefer that as well.
Listen, I prefer sincere invitations. I might hang around.
I didn't know.
I might accept the pity invitation.
I didn't even know you were going to be here. So that's the only reason I'm saying that. And
so the only reason you showed up is because you knew you didn't think I was going to be here. Is this where we're? Fuck you, man.
Overjoyed. I was overjoyed. We love it. We love it. Just stay and chill.
You know the most offensive thing. You know the most offensive thing, Hutch, that Pisco did to me is again when he closed the door in the face of my wife and I to his palatial condo, and then for him to not only lock the door but to hear the bolt slide and everything. You know, it's like
Southerners,
fucking
man, with their
locked in the mines
guns.
of Moria.
Because I know you love your guns. Okay, should we start?
You give off a vibe. You give off a vibe.
Wait here.
Wait, hold on, Jessiah. What guns? Do you have a gun, Jessiah?
No, I don't.
No, it's
okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting better. I'm getting better. It's fucking cool,
dude.
All right, go ahead. Yeah.
You got fucking your piece.
Have you been shooting?
It's pretty impressive.
I got a new 9mm.
You got a second gun?
M&P, yeah. The first one is a gift from my dad. That one's just kind of a meme hand cannon, but I wanted a gun for self-defense, and I'm fucking getting better, and it's cool. But anyways, yeah, go ahead. It's fucking hard to shoot a bullet straight. It's fucking really hard, even just 5 feet in front of you. You do like when you pull the trigger, your hand kind of jerks, and just like a slightest movement makes you like 2 feet off your target. And so just like the smallest things, like pulling the trigger without moving the rest of your hand, is so much harder than you fucking would think it is. And
where you truly elevate to like a master marksman is, if you ever watched that documentary with James McAvoy and Angelina Jolie, it's called Wanted, and you can teach you how to curve the bullet. Yeah.
That's what
they wanted to do a sequel, but
that's what they think Alex Preddy was doing around getting.
Oh my God.
True. Yeah.
Are you sick and tired of debating that shit yet? Because I didn't get a chance to watch it. But I heard like you had a fucking marathon last night.
You barely even debated it. I mean, the guys were so low IQ. I forget what they said. Oh, so at one point they were trying to argue that it was reasonable for the officers to think that Preddy had a second gun, and their argument, and I'm not even, people can fact check me if they want in the chats if you watched it, his argument was to tomfoolery. He was like, wait, why do you think that it's likely that he would have a second gun? And the guy says the following: well, in order to have a second gun, you need to have a first gun. That was his argument about why it was likely that he had a second gun, is because logically, in order to have a second gun, you need to have a first gun. And he had a first gun. Therefore, it's likely that that was the caliber.
I'm telling you, that's been caliber.
Wait, while you guys are talking real quick, I'm just going to deafen for literally a minute and just get to some super chats and then come right back. 1 second. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk shit while he's gone.
Yeah, dude.
Fuck that guy.
What do you think of so what was the interviews that you wanted me to watch? It's the one with BTC.
It was
and
Brian Tyler Cohen, and then I did one with Mike Nellis about a week ago.
Okay, we'll watch those. What do you what's your preliminary before Hutch goes back? I think I probably know it, but do you think like I do that this whole like who's in the coalition, who's not in the coalition is like a very like ill-defined, vague concept that the people who are like critiquing the more quote unquote proximate allies that you and I recognize seems vague, like what they want. Like
I mean, for me, it's just as long as you prefer Democrats to Republicans, then that's it. I mean, like, you know, I know Kyle Kalinske dropped the ball in 2016. I know he did in 2020, and I think he started to show promise pre-Gaza. He had that viral debate he and Crystal did with Breonna Joy Gray, and then Gaza happened, and I guess it blackpilled him on Kamala and Biden. But it was, you know, recent commitments that he made and like recent coverage where he's like, you know, I'm in a different place now and I'll vote for fucking Joe Manchin over what, you know, as long as that's the case, then, you know, I can fuck with Kyle. It doesn't, you know, matter so much what you did in the past. Now, if Kyle reverts course, you know, and as the election gets closer, it's, you know, it better be it better be President AOC as the Democratic nominee, or I'm not voting Democrat, then yeah, that'd be a bridge breaking moment between Kyle and I. I wouldn't hate him personally, but that I could no longer in good conscience support him as a political commentator. It's the same thing with the Vanguard. I like the guys at the Vanguard. I don't co-sign everything they say, but for me, it's like I've got a pretty high threshold for who I'm willing to fuck with, and it's just based on, it's based on, do you prefer the Democrats to the Republicans? And quite frankly, like that's part of the reason why, I mean, I'll be totally honest, like I didn't know much about Hassan a year ago, but the more I've gotten to understand about him, like that he didn't come out and endorse Kamala or even say that Kamala was preferable. And then I hear like Ogre Boy and other people defend his coverage. Like, and quite frankly, that's where I hear a lot of it is from his secondhand defenders about how, okay, sure, he never said that Kamala was better, but he hinted at it in so many ways by talking about how bad Trump was. Like, I couldn't fuck with Hassan. I think it was a mistake to invite Hassan to the Crooked Con, the big, Pod Save America convention or whatever. I don't mind He was there. He was a guest. He did a really good panel with Tim Miller and Jessica Tarlov and some others as well. But to me, it's like, I don't care if you're moderate or progressive or socialist or whatever. Like I'm at this point, policy is secondary to me to accountability and institutional reform, so we can set the stage for the sort of policy we prefer. My red line is, do you make it clear that the Democrats are better than the Republicans? And if you don't make that clear, if you don't state that preference, then I can't fuck with you.
Well, I'm surprised to hear you say that. So I thought you were going to say he shouldn't have been invited to the DNC in the context of 2024. But you think he shouldn't have been invited to the crooked media thing? Why?
Well, I can't remember where. I don't know what Hassan's position was when he was invited at the time of the DNC. I don't know what his stated position was where he was on Kamala versus Trump, because I think at the time of the DNC, correct me if I'm wrong, was that when she was still in her more populist rhetoric arc than
he was withholding an endorsement
at the time.
Yes.
Yeah. At the time, I don't know. I think that's a calculation. Yeah, I think at that point, I think that once the election came, let me put it like this. I think if they were trying to get him to the DNC to coax him into making an endorsement, that's fair. But after 2024, that he didn't make an endorsement, I would not invite him to the next DNC unless he is prepared to make an endorsement.
And what about
that's how I look at it. To me, the red line is, again, the preference for Democrats over Republicans. I don't care if you're the Vanguard, Kyle,
and that's because you don't consider him a journalist. Because you wouldn't say that about journalists and.
No, he's not a journalist. He's a political. I'm not a journalist. Like it pisses me off. I appreciate it when my commenters are like, "Oh, that's great journalism." I'm like, "Sir, I am not a journalist. I rely on journalists to give my political opinion." But
got it. And
like I don't mind that sort of outreach, but like the Crooked Con thing, like, because he'd already had an interview. Well, it's just, again, like, they never came out and explicitly said this. I at least not in so many words, but the whole point of Crooked Con was to boost, the lib-left coalition, and as with Democrats being their political proxies, and I'm just not sure that applies to Hassan. Again, I'm not saying cut him out entirely. I'm not saying never make overtures, but when you reach out your hand so many times and it gets slapped away, at some point you just got to withdraw the hand and focus on other parts of the coalition.
Okay, we have Hutch back.
That's my stance.
Let's calibrate stuff. Hutch, what do you want to
talk about? You're cutting out a little bit sometimes.
Oh, so, can you hear me better now?
Me or Pisco?
Pisco. It's just every once in a while you kind of cut out.
Maybe because I'm not talking
closer to the mic.
Yeah, I'll get close to the mic right here. So I understand that we'll probably get into these sort of issues. But I want to give Hutch the floor to structure the conversation the way you want, and what is it that you want to chat about?
I think it's pretty simple. Like, just piggybacking off of the tail end of what I caught from Jessiah there. I think my red line in terms of identifying who is a true coalition partner / ally to the cause would be that the person is committed to voting for Democrats in the general election, or independents that caucus with Democrats, obviously. That's my red line in the general. So if somebody is using the Hassan strat, for example, of not endorsing in a general to try to extract concessions, I view that kind of electoral strategy as, I don't know if I can say this on YouTube without getting demonetized, but it's like a unaliving pact, a self-unaliving pact, to use that kind of strategy. You can do that in the primary. You can do that in the primary. You can be fucking kind of ruthless in the primary, up to I think reasonable standards. Like, for example, maybe don't like spread lies that Josh Shapiro covered up a fucking murder. I feel like that is like very destructive kind of primary. But you can be like pretty combative and adversarial in a primary. But this strategy that lefties have, a lot of lefties have of potentially signaling, you know what, I might help Republicans win this election if I don't get this concession. That person is not a coalition partner. They're not an ally to Hassan specifically. He was just interviewed by, I don't know, some guy. He was interviewing some guy like a couple days ago, and the guy asked him like, are you going to tell your audience to vote for Democrats? And Hassan said, well, I have my people that I'm going to tell them to vote for. That's not a coalition partner. His only concern is transforming the Democratic Party to be more leftist, more socialisty, more kind of like moving in his direction. That is his like top of his Maslow's hierarchy of political needs. His is like transforming the Democratic Party into basically a socialist structure. Yeah, he puts that above beating Republicans. I put beating Republicans above everything else. And so to that extent, I don't think me and him are on the same team.
Yeah, I want to eventually get into like what it means to be on the same team and what it follows from it. But I'm just taking what I heard. I heard your test for who's a member of the coalition and who's a coalition partner. I heard it. And I want to ask you, therefore, on that test, Joe Manchin is not a coalition partner.
Sorry, explain. What do you mean?
Joe Manchin did not endorse Kamala Harris, refused to endorse Kamala Harris in 2024.
Is that true? Then yeah, he was not a coalition partner in 2024.
And why are you trying to say we need more Joe Manchins?
Joe Manchin, the senator, at the time that I talk about him, was probably the most valuable Democrat that we had in the entire Senate.
Yeah, but
I can't speak to Joe Manchin's attitude in 2024. When I say I want more Joe Manchins, I mean I want more Democrats that can win in ruby red districts and states. That's what I mean.
You're willing to work
just
with
to clarify,
who are not part of your coalition and even elect them.
Just to clarify, I just want to confirm because I'd forgotten about this, but he's right because she says she was willing to get rid of the filibuster, so he refused to endorse. So
yeah, he was not
in late September
partner. And
yeah, but in that moment, he was not a coalition partner. If not being a coalition partner isn't enough to get you to even pine for them to participate in elections and for Democrats to vote for them and to have more types of those people in certain situations where it makes it helpful, I just don't understand then what is meant. Like, why is it important that you're part of the coalition or not if you will even think that we should have more non-coalition members as part of the Democratic Party?
I guess I'm separating a coalition of like voters and a coalition like a coalition that includes both the voters and the politicians, because you guys, if it came out that Hunter Biden was caught on camera sacrificing children and sucking up their adrenochrome, we just knew that 1,000%. But he ran in Nebraska and was competitive, I would vote for him, and I would encourage my viewers to vote for him as well.
But it's not like, but it's not like that, Hutch, because, and I'm trying to be respectful. Like, it's not like, you know, hold my nose, I'll vote for Hassan versus Donald Trump and these like ridiculous hypotheticals that we construct. It's like part of your view is we need to have more types like Joe Manchin and actively encourage them to get involved in these different places. And so it's part of your view is to push for people who ostensibly would not be quote unquote coalition partners to be active members of the Democratic Party. And I'm sure if Manchin were running again, you would interview him, you would advocate strenuously that people vote for him, you wouldn't treat him the way that you treat Hassan.
No, I think I would push him on. You didn't endorse Kamala. What's that all about? I'm certain I would push him in that respect. But if Joe Manchin himself announced a candidacy in West Virginia and it looked like he could win in that race, I would endorse him even after this non-endorsement.
Even though he's not a coalition partner, you would say that people should vote for him. Yeah, and the same thing with Mamdani.
Mamdani in New York City didn't endorse Kamala Harris. I still encourage people to vote for him and said I would vote for him in New York City.
What is the teeth of this coalition partner thing? Yeah, what's the teeth of the coalition partner?
I'm applying different standards to like the politicians themselves and the voters. Like I'm separating the two things. So because my highest order principle or my like guiding foundational kind of principle is the idea that we have to beat Republicans in elections by any means necessary.
And you're holding politicians to a lower standard.
Yeah,
then
I am.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. If it means like expanding majorities and making it more difficult for Republicans to win future majorities, then yes. Yeah.
But what if someone assesses
I would
that streaming with Hassan increases the chance of Democratic majorities because you're able to convince a more convincing part of like.
I would endorse that. I would endorse them going on Hassan's stream, even though he's a tanky.
And I should say, as a point of clarification, because I guess I understand where there's seeming dissonance there, at least superficially. It's hard to imagine endorsing or supporting somebody who wouldn't endorse or support the Democratic candidate unless he was meaningfully better than the Republican alternative. So that's what you mean. Like your even now, your support for Manchin depends on him still being an ally to the Democratic Party if he were running for office, right? If electing Joe Manchin, for example, if he was just going to caucus with the Republicans this time as an independent, then you probably wouldn't waste your time.
Correct.
Yeah, no, I understand all that. I'm not saying that it would be irrational for Hutch to behave that way or even to argue like, fuck, we're going to need more conservative Democrats in given places. I'm not saying that I even disagree with that. It's just like the test, therefore, of like whether you're a coalition partner, it just seems to mean very little, that there's no like necessary entailment from it. There's no like you should treat them bad necessarily. There's no you shouldn't work with them necessarily. There's no, and so I'm just like, well, then what is left of this whole are you a member of the coalition thing? I don't even understand that. Therefore, like, why does it matter that you are or not? Does it just mean like me, like I like you or you don't like them? Like, I don't understand what's left of this coalition thing.
When I say coalition, I mean anti-MAGA, anti-Republican Party coalition, a coalition that is focused primarily on taking power from Republicans. And so if I'm confronted with a leftist or any other person who is only interested in boosting candidates that they personally like and will take actions and will take actions that materially help Republicans in some races because maybe the Democrat, they don't actually like them, then they are opposition, right? I don't understand how they're not political opposition.
If by definition you're defining opposition to mean someone who would
helps Republicans.
If that's the definition of opposition, then they're trivially opposition. You've just defined opposition in such a way.
Trivial.
But I mean, when I say trivial,
trivial? That's the whole game, right?
When I say trivial, I'm using it as a term of art to mean the definition you provided. You're just stating facts that conclude the definition with respect to these different actors. And so when you ask, wouldn't that obviously be oppositional? Well, yeah, if you define opposition that way, trivial in the sense that all you've done is you've looked at the language of the definition and you've just set out those facts about a hypothetical person. And so I have to grant you on your terminology that they would be opposition. That's what I mean. It's not like... Go ahead, sir.
Well, I would consider them opposition because they are opposing my political goals.
Like Joe Manchin was.
There could be narrow instances or narrow examples of him opposing my goals. So he was, in my opinion, if that's true that he didn't endorse Kamala, then in 2024 I would consider him opposition.
Right. But then I'm like, well, then what is the significance of being labeled opposition? If you're labeled opposition and not part of the political coalition, but someone like you, who I think is very based in harm reduction, and you really do want to see the country better off, and not in the hands of like this fascist threat, you're willing to work with the opposition when it suits your interest, and when you think, and even think that like
they wouldn't be my opposition if they were on the same page as me, though. That's my point. You're not my opposition if you're like a Marxist Leninist who, maybe your ultimate goal is like a socialist revolution. But if you're on the same page about helping to elect Democrats because you think that helps your goal, then sure, we can be on the same team for that election cycle. And I disagree that that's going to lead to a socialist revolution. So I'm not that concerned about it.
Sure. But then it just feels like the vanguard on that view, or at least Zach from the vanguard, would be part of the coalition and Joe Manchin would not in 2024. That's not how you act.
No, I think they're opposition. And like, I think that we're touching on something a little bit different here. Because, like, there's a couple things. So they say that they'll support whoever the nominee is in 2028. I just frankly don't believe them. So they could surprise me. That's fine. Or they could do the thing that like Emma Vigeland did. She's like a really good example of someone who, endorsed Kamala Harris, told her followers that they should vote for Kamala Harris. And at the same time, she was like undercutting Kamala rhetorically along the way in a way that I think like
As was
depresses
Manchin.
turnout.
Well, I don't know if Manchin has as much. Are you suggesting that Vanguard has more influence than Manchin, and that Manchin wasn't also saying things that like she's not competent, she's not vote? It does feel like
No, I'm not saying that they had.
Oh, it feels like Manchin
I'm not saying that they're.
I'm not trying to interrupt you. I think there's a delay. I really am not trying to interrupt you.
It seems like you're going for like a gotcha with Manchin,
No.
but if Manchin is opposed to helping every Democrat on the ticket in 2028, then he's my opposition, right?
No, we can just put Manchin to the side. I think the point I'm trying to illustrate is I don't actually even disagree with you saying, well, we have to work with Manchin in certain cases, or people like Manchin even when they are obstinate because of the realities of the situation. And so like there, not much fight with me on that. It just means that like the significance of being labeled opposition just simply seems to be, did you endorse or not? And there's no additional entailment from that of like how you should treat them. There's like way more facts that need to be known before any other kind of like entailment, by which I mean any kind of necessary response emerges. And in fact, it might even be smart sometimes to bring in people who maybe were opposition or who moonlight in opposition to your side and treat them very, very well. And so that's what I'm trying to say, is not that your responses to Manchin don't ever make sense, but that the Manchin example shows that this term, not part of the coalition, not part of our group, not part of, or part of the opposition, doesn't have a lot of weight other than to just be a synonym for didn't endorse. I hope that makes sense.
Well, I'm trying to use this. Yeah, go ahead, Josiah.
Just real quick, there's a chatter there, and he raises a good point, but I think it needs some clarity here. So he says, Manchin helps a coalition in a way a politician is supposed to by voting with Democrats. Hassan is a pundit. He did not help the way that a pundit is supposed to. And my only quibble there is the timeline that Pisco is referring to, Manchin was no longer in office.
Well, he was a sitting U.S. senator, I think.
That would be like a separate...
Was it? Oh, wait, when did his term expire? Was it January 2025?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. So he was a lame duck senator, not seeking re-election, but he was technically in office. And
he was fucking up in office. He was like not
Democratic.
voting. He was like not voting for Democrats nominees either. He was fucking shit up in the Senate. He was doing a bunch of that shit too. So like, and also senators can wear different hats. Like, I don't think he was operating as like a senator in that sense with respect to like the legislation when he goes on fucking shows to talk shit about Kamala, which he did.
Right. And so I understand, I take the point, but I think that I disagree. I guess ultimately I think that Manchin did have an obligation to endorse Kamala Harris. I think the expectation needs to be the same. I think it's possible, because I think Pisco himself would agree with this. You would rather have a Democratic-aligned Joe Manchin in West Virginia than a Republican. So there he has utility to the Democratic Party, but also as a thought leader in the anti-Trump coalition, he also had an obligation to endorse Kamala Harris and did not.
One quick thing. I think, unfortunately, there's something very uncomfortable about what we're discovering now with this Manchin example, which is it is an undeniable fact that Hassan signaled more that he was going to vote for Kamala than Manchin. And if that's the only thing that we're assessing on whether you're in opposition or not, then unfortunately, just based on the empirical evidence and the tests you provided, Manchin in 2024 was more opposition than Hassan Pike.
I mean, I could even grant you that, and I don't understand how it undercuts my thinking at all.
Well, I'm not saying that it necessarily does. I'm just saying it doesn't seem that there's much significance to this label opposition if it doesn't really reflect how we're going to view a person, what we're going to do with the person, and whether or not that person should be like welcomed back. There's other stuff. And so this just the opposition label, the coalition, it's a red herring. It's just being used as a synonym for did you endorse or not, but there's not any other necessary entailment or prescription that comes after that.
There's other things that come beyond just like an endorsement. Like the second order thing that I would focus on is like a good faith analysis. I mean good faith by like both in the sense that I know that this person is going to do what they can to just to not like lie and deceive, but also I know that this like commentator or pundit or whoever, this is someone that I can rely on to be rigorous in their fact checking and make sure that they're taking steps on their end to be like reliable sources of information. And that's where I think people like Vanguard and unfortunately Kyle Kalinske to a lesser degree are not rigorous in the stuff that they report on their channels.
Yeah,
they will see stuff that pops up on their. You were watching the Kyle Kalinske video and you saw that he was like amplifying like a CCP propagandist to make a point about the Democratic Party. I can't even remember what the specific point was. That to me, I think is extremely destructive because it
was more like it wasn't for its factual component. It was for like the analysis. And yeah, I saw the account. I'm like, this, they should probably like, before they put some, unless they're specific, like this is a viewer thing, or this is what people are saying on Twitter as like a segment or something. And again, unfortunately, the video didn't provide enough context for me to assess whether it was responsible or not. And that's one of the failures of the video, is to give a foundation for why any given instance of look at Twitter bros, that it was irresponsible, because there can be uses of Twitter as news. Jessiah, for example, will often, as part of his segments, look to the response on Twitter. It just is a fact that it is part of the commentary, because people who are important are talking on Twitter, or maybe even not important, just have an interesting view. And so I think there's more to show that specific usage was irresponsible. But on your substantive point, I'm fine. Like, there are definitely things that would distinguish Manchin, Hassan, Vanguard, all these people, all right, in many different ways that you would have to be a fool not to think about. And I understand that, but I think that we need to get over the simplistic opposition coalition language and say, well, the reason you shouldn't hang out with Hassan, the reason you shouldn't hang out with the Vanguard isn't because they refuse to endorse, they didn't endorse strenuously enough. It's because they're liars. It's because the balance of their coverage is this. It's because there's a way higher standard for a pundit than an elected politician. And like, let's get to the meat of the basis of the prescriptions and not just do the simplistic on-off switch of coalition.
Well, I feel like this has come up a lot, and maybe I'm not articulating myself well. I'm not even being insincere. Like, it's possible. My chat just introduced me to a Reddit thread where they were unpacking how I can be bad with my language sometimes, or inarticulate. But I've never told you, and I've never told Jessiah, and I've never told anyone else, like, do not talk to Vanguard, do not talk to Kyle, do not talk to Crystal or Emma. I don't even care. Like, it's not even my preference that you be just like outwardly hostile towards these people all the time. My only thing that I'm asking of people is to just push back in the particularly egregious cases and highlight the absurd claims that are thrown around very flippantly in those circles. Like the claim that Josh Shapiro covered up a murder.
I think it's ridiculous.
Absurd. I think it's
ridiculous. And I will talk to him about it. Yeah.
But the problem with that, Pisco, is that took me about fucking 2 minutes, 2 to 4 minutes of Google searching to get information about like, and all you need to know about why that's absurd is like, who is the one that gets to decide if a death is reclassified from a self-unaliving to a homicide? It's not the governor. It's like the coroner or whatever. It's like the local.
Well, he was AG.
One of the local.
He was AG at the time, but
no, but the AG doesn't have the power to.
I'm just saying. I'm just correcting on the fact that it was when he was AG is when they're alleging the malfeasance. But I agree with you on the disposition there.
Did I say governor? Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't mean
No worries. I just want to make sure people I think that you knew that. I wanted. That's why I'm not correcting you to be an asshole. I'm just saying it because I meant
he was AG at the time. I misspoke. But like that example is so bad. It implies a level of recklessness that, like, I think if you do what we do for a living, you should have some fucking pride in your work. Okay. Like, I think you have a responsibility to your audience who look to you as a reliable source of information to do everything in your power to make sure that the things that you're saying are accurate. And everyone's going to make mistakes. Everyone is going to get the facts wrong on this or that thing. I'm not demanding perfection. I am demanding, as a reasonable standard, that you do a cursory fucking Google search. When you hear a claim like Josh Shapiro covered up a murder, you fucking just
here's
like
the thing, Hutch.
Google it, bro.
I agree. I agree with that. But I want to push back on Timothy Douglas in the chat. He says, Pisco, no, not I will talk to them later. One of the reasons why I said I wanted to talk to them later is because I recall briefly looking into it in a cursory way during the conversations about VP, but I wasn't prepared in the moment to even know the name of the girl who was stabbed so many times and the facts of it. And one of the things that I don't want to do in any given situation is initiate a pushback when I'm not confident that I will be able to do so effectively. And so one of the reasons why I said we can talk about that later is because I was fairly convinced that I'm actually quite convinced that it's not the case. And I remember doing a cursory look, but in the moment, I wasn't confident in my ability to recite them. And there's nothing wrong. You guys took it, and I think Timothy Douglas took it as like, oh, he's running away from disagreement in that moment. What I wanted to do was me do my due diligence and not to initiate a conversation where they could potentially run laps around me and I would fail in my duty. So what I did was, I think responsible, I don't think people should have an issue with it, is to say, hey, like, let's focus on this other part. We can talk about that later. And when I go and talk to them about it, I will sound way smarter and I will be able to be more convincing to them and their audience than in that moment if I just did it off the cuff and like, wait a second, this isn't even true to, and doing this on the fly, which can be very difficult sometimes and make you look bad. And so, but everyone was shouting at me like, how could you just let that stand? How could you just let that stand? Like, isn't that fucked up? For like, why is it wrong for me to like say, hey, we can talk about that later? Especially when I'm thinking like, oh shit, what was the murder called? When was it? I don't have the timeline. Like, in order to do that and to do it effectively, you need to actually be prepared.
So I think that's reasonable. I mean, Jessiah, you've been quiet for a little bit. I'm wondering if you have some thoughts here.
Well, I just saw a new Piers Morgan panel with Ethan Klein on it. That's the first time.
What?
Benny Johnson talking about Don Lemon. That's going to be Glenn Beck, Benny Johnson, Ethan Klein talking about Don Lemon, the Epstein files, and some that's going to be interesting. I mean, look, I guess I just don't have a particular dog in this. I didn't see Pisco's conversation with the Vanguard. My position is, as far as the coalition goes, and I go right back where I started. If you have a stated preference for the Democratic Party over the Republican Party, I consider you in my coalition, particularly if that manifests in a call to action to vote. The reason I would consider the Vanguard more coalition adjacent than Hassan is because, based on my understanding, Hassan never did anything. He doesn't stay. Not only did he not give a call to action to vote for Kamala Harris, as far as I'm aware, but in the clips that I've seen, like Hutch provide, like there was one where I guess he was in Minneapolis, and he just gave the asinine comment that this would have happened under a Democratic administration. Like, that's just incredibly reductive and irresponsible. I don't think the Vanguard would say something like that. If they did, they would be objectively wrong. I know that Kyle, I use Kyle as the example, while Hutch had us deafened, Kyle dropped the ball in 2016. He dropped the ball in 2020. He picked the ball back up in 2023, right before Gaza, then dropped it again. And I don't think he ever explicitly endorsed Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. But my grace for Kyle has come for what he has said since then, which is that the resistance libs were right, and he would vote for Joe Manchin over any Republican. He would go out and vote for Joe Manchin over any Republican. And so I'm willing to show him some grace there. Now, if Kyle Kalinske drops the ball again in 2028 and just says, you know what, both sides are the same, or I'm not endorsing or supporting, then that's the end of our bridge. I could still be friendly to him, but that'd be the end of our political coalition.
And I just want to say, like, I think that Jesiah's summary there is fine. I totally agree that for me, the more relevant thing is like now. That's why I treat Richard Hanania differently than I treat someone like Rob Noor, who I treat very differently with someone like
or Liz Cheney,
Liz
exactly. Cheney.
There's skills here, but I have no problem on specific issues like contradicting or calling out Kyle. Unfortunately, sometimes when I want to do that, it might be something that some libs don't like. So, for example, I just saw him today on the Epstein files make all sorts of, in my opinion, what I feel are wild extrapolations in terms of the certainty of knowledge. Even though he gives this kind of statement, we don't know that all these specific allegations are true about Trump on some things, he, without any qualification or equivocation, says that we know for sure that Trump is a rapist with respect to children. He knows for certain that,
or that Alex Preddy was the victim of a targeted assassination.
Oh yeah, he says that too. I think that, and he doesn't caveat the way he should. I don't think that's responsible. I don't think that's right. But and I would talk to him about that stuff. The thing is, like, I understand that, and I understand that there are good criticisms that can be made of him, of me, of Crystal, of all these, of Jesiah, all that shit. At the end of the day, for me, they are disagreements. They are disagreements, and they might, in fact, be discrete. Maybe they're broader in the sense of like who this person is and their continuing coverage of events. But what I'm interested in is like, what is the so what? English teachers ask, so what? So what to your essay? What is like the call to action? What is the thing that I'm not doing that I ought do? And where's the best example of that so that I can understand why so many people seem to raise this, like, you're bootlicking for tankies, come into tanky yourself. These people are not part of the coalition. Where is the thing that I'm not doing or that I am doing where I either should do it or should refrain from doing it?
My answer to that question is to be more confrontational. Just generally, just to be more confrontational when in the face of some of these, you said not responsible. I will say reckless. I think Kyle is just reckless. I think he's been reckless throughout his entire career. And I think he's just a reckless kind of person that does not seem to do. I mean, I feel like he was different because I'm told that he used to put sources in the description of his videos, and now that just doesn't happen anymore. And so I'm told, I didn't follow his career closely, but I'm told that he used to be better in that respect. But and in the particular case with Vanguard and the Shapiro thing, I think that's reasonable if you're not keyed in on the facts. Like, that happens all the time when you have conversations with like insane conspiracy theory people like Rob North, for example.
Yeah.
Like, he can go on a fucking 30-minute rant about like really.
But I'm more
hyper-niche
familiar with those
theories.
facts usually. And I saw a comment from Timothy Douglas again in the chat was like, well, you wouldn't do that for MAGA. Usually because I spend more time covering MAGA, I like know about the Burisma stuff. I know about it, the different allegations about Alvin Bragg and this and that. And so I'm able to, like, almost magically in front of the audience's eyes, I have the capability because I'm just more well-read. But it actually does take a lot of facts to contradict some of the conspiracies. And on the left, I just spend less time on that than I do on the right. And then maybe that's what I should do more, is spend more time on conspiracy on the left. But I just don't know in virtue of what should I. Like, I feel like I should spend most of my time on the MAGA stuff because that's like my primary enemy.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I'm not going to spend. I mean, I shouldn't say not spend, because there are times on Twitter and in my YouTube videos where I'll call out, people on the left or even Democrats as well. So I'm not going to say that it's just never going to be my primary focus. And again, for me, the line is, but that's just me. Do you prefer the Democrats to the Republicans? Will you urge your people to vote for Democrats over the Republicans? So now let's say that you have a commentator who says, yes, I recognize that the Democrats on their worst day are better than the Republicans on their best day, but I'm not going to encourage my chat to vote for them. Then I would say I would probably leave myself open to engaging with them, but I don't think I would consider them part of the coalition. So let's say Zach and Gavin from the Vanguard come out and they say, Jessiah, which I don't even know if I consider them part of the coalition anyway. I haven't really thought about this, but I like the guys, and they've been friendly with me. We've had some heated back and forth. Zach in particular, he and I have gone back and forth on when they've had me on their show 2 or 3 times. But let's say they come to me and they say, Jessiah, listen, we recognize empirically the Democratic Party is better than the Republican Party, but we're not going to encourage our audience to vote for Democrats in 2028. And then I would probably say, well, listen, we can still be buddies or whatever. I'll test check your pulse from time to time, but we're not part of the same coalition. And so I'm going to spend less time, trying to do outreach or whatever. That's how I look at it. It's got to be a stated preference, and then it's got to be a call to action to vote for the Democrats when push come to shove. And that goes for Kyle too. If Kyle, reneges on it like he did in 2016, 2020, 2024, that would be the end of, you would see a lot less Kyle content on my channel, a lot less me covering Kyle in very flattering lights when he goes on Piers Morgan.
100%. And there's tons of proof of this, because like, if Kyle was talking like Cenk Uygur, you don't think that we would be calling him out? Whenever I see something like negative, like Cenk Uygur doing a false equivalence, he did it the other day where he even said that Biden opened the border or something, like they weren't enforcing the border, and that was madness. And that's part of the uniparty shit. Like, it was the most stupid fucking thing there's ever been. And if he was talking like that, making a false equivalence or in that kind of respect, I would be calling that out. And the final thing, I'll let you talk, Hutch. I'm sorry. Timothy Douglas says, treat a leftist saying Shapiro covered up murder the same way you treat a MAGA saying it. And that's not like, we'll have a conversation about it later. G. Willikers, I guess I'll talk to you about it later. If I say something like, you guys are fucking liars, this is so wrong, whatever, and they call me on it in that moment, and I like don't have the best command of the facts in that moment, like, do you understand that if I write a check that I can't cash and they call me on it, it looks fucking horrible, and you look like an idiot saying that if I'm not confident in the moment to have that discussion, that I should anyway, or to have a strong position and be like, yeah, well, I know you're wrong, and I just don't remember. Like, this is so stupid. Obviously, the right thing in that context is to say, I don't agree with you. I think that's wrong. Let's talk about it later. And unfortunately, you're saying, no, I had to have known all of those facts. I had to have known to debate it in that moment. And even if I didn't, I should have, like, puffed up my chest and say, I know it, so that they can just call me on it and I can look like a fucking idiot. That's what you would do, Timothy, because you are an idiot. Sorry, Hutch, good.
Well, I also say, I'm sorry, real quick, because chat, and not to give one guide, I understand what they're saying. I just disagree with it. People are saying that Cenk and Kyle are the same. I don't think even Hutch would say that. I mean, Kyle's gone after Cenk nonstop since Cenk started his like MAGA diplomacy thing. I mean, one of the worst ass beatings we've seen in like alternative media was the conversation that Cenk had with Crystal on Breaking Points. Like I think right before Trump was inaugurated or shortly thereafter. Like I do think there's a meaningful difference between Kyle and Crystal's commentary and what Cenk is doing. I mean, Cenk is talking about breaking bread with MAGA, and he's you know, he has all the negatives associated with Crystal and Kyle, and I think very little by way of the positives. Like Hutch, would you agree that you see meaningful difference?
I mean, I would say Cenk is worse, but I would push back against the idea that Kyle doesn't do false equivalencies with the Democrats and Republicans. I just watched a video just like a week and a half ago where he, in no uncertain terms, basically described the Democratic Party, while they're the minority, by the way, as Republican light. I mean, you can call that colorful language or hyperbole if you want, but I find that to be extremely destructive. And I know I brought it up in our conversation, Pisco, but I'll bring it up again here with Jessiah, because I don't know if he saw that. It was a couple weeks ago. I just pulled up, I'll check in with Kyle's videos like once every couple weeks on stream. So I just pulled up the first video that I saw where he was talking about the Democratic Party. And in that video, he made a claim, speaking of the recklessness that we were talking about before, that Gavin Newsom vetoed a single payer bill in California. That might not seem to be like a big deal on the surface, but I think there's more to that kind of rhetoric than meets the eye. Because I think Kyle is in that moment, he is basically telling his audience that Gavin Newsom committed a cardinal sin. When you look at the priorities of Kyle Kulinski's political wing of the last like 10, 15 years, it's been Medicare for all, single payer healthcare. That's been like the number one goal for their movement. And so to say that a bill to give everyone in California single payer healthcare landed on Biden's desk and he vetoed it, I think he's actually communicating something deeper with that. And I think he is signaling that he would not vote for Newsom in 2028. And I think he is, you guys surely would agree that
I will ask
Newsom,
him.
as it stands
I
now,
will
has
ask
a
him,
pretty
yes.
decent chance of
Yes.
winning the nomination, right? So
I will ask
think
him
it's
this.
really bad for someone with a audience size that large to be telling people information like that is just simply not true.
I don't understand that, Hutch, because on the one hand, I'll ask him that. By the way, if he answers yes to that, people, half the audience, as they did with the Vanguard when I asked them the very same thing, they will say, I don't believe him. Do you believe him? Do you believe him? And like, so they can't win in that respect, because they'll just say, well, come on, he just says that as a self-serving statement, and you have to look at the balance of the coverage. He's doing material harm, whatever you want to say about that. But I will ask him the question, and the next time I talk to him. But number two, with respect to the other statements that Kyle has made, where he has said, I would like walk through nails to vote for Joe Manchin at this point. You don't think that would apply to Gavin Newsom, or you think that he was being insincere in that moment when he does regularly say stuff like that? And I understand, I saw in the video that you showed me that he referred to Republican light in the context, I think, of a Cory Booker statement on Israel or something. And so I don't know if it was the same, it's as broad as you're trying to make it, but regardless, he makes the statements that I would like do anything to vote for Joe Manchin, like given how different they are in this context. And so why don't you credit that?
I think we judge people by their actions, and I know how he's been for his whole career in terms of his political strategy. Just the fact that he's saying that it's going to be different now, that's not enough for me. Like, honestly, we have a good test coming up in the midterms, Like, will we see him suggest to his audience members that they support more moderate candidates? Like that. If we see that, then great, I'll welcome that. And if he does do that, then, he will have like built goodwill for me, and I'll be inclined to believe that he'll do the same in the future. But that's not going to change the fact that I think that people like Kyle and people like Emma, I think, is like the worst example of like
Emma endorsed Kamala.
But Emma Vigeland is just like, when we talk about the flowchart meme, it's like a literal meme with her. Like, I don't know if you've watched, I've watched like a decent amount of Majority Report stuff, and it's like comical. We'll do like bets with the chat, like how long until she makes this thing that Trump did about the Democratic Party. And it's just a matter of time. It happens like basically every fucking time. And so for me, it's like, that's the basement of whether or not I would consider someone to be like on the same side is, are you willing to endorse a policy or electoral strategy of straight to
which Emma
Democrat?
meets more than Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin talks a lot of shit about Democrats all the time too, and he did back when he was senator.
So listen,
my party's crazy. My party's insane. Everyone on my party's insane. I think they're totally out to sea on everything. Like, Manchin would constantly shit on Democrats every single second.
We're not talking about.
I'm trying to compare the standard.
Talking about pundits.
Okay, I know that there's a different standard. You're saying you're applying a higher standard for pundits.
Manchin was also instrumental in getting all of Joe Biden's.
I understand that.
I'm not clear.
I understand that. I'm not disagreeing with that. All I'm just trying to say is, on purely the metric of coalition or not coalition, I consider Emma Vigeland way closer than Joe Manchin's conduct. And that's including, I understand that Joe Manchin was essential for Biden's policies in a way that Emma Vigeland was not. But on the specific question of political alignment and the standards that you put forth, I don't even think it's close.
It's like the Soviet Union and the United States in World War II. I view it that way, where it's like after the election, we're in a kind of a Cold War situation with people like Emma Vigeland. But I'll take the help. I'll take the help during elections, but I think it's extremely destructive. Here, I want to let you speak, Jessiah, but I just want to give you like an assessment of like, here's where I view people like Emma, Kyle, Hassan, and Vanguard. I think all of them have a philosophy that can be summarized as, they represent a silent majority of people in this country that are actually super far lefty, but they just don't know it yet. And they think that the Democratic Party, one of the primary functions of the Democratic Party, is to prevent them from taking power. And so their main priority is changing like the Democratic Party fundamentally, which there's nothing wrong with that goal in itself. Like, everybody kind of has that goal when you're doing political engagement. Okay, that's fine. But they serve up this narrative, this constant narrative, that they're the victims of like the Democratic establishment boot. And if only the Democratic establishment would just get out of the way, then all of us would have healthcare and, we would all like just be fucking super tight and get along, and it would be great. And that, I think, like, I totally disagree with them.
Yeah, but that's a substantive, that's a substantive like disagreement though, right? Like, what about that?
I think they're wrong. I mean, I just think they're wrong about like their assessment of where the voters are at. I think they're wrong about the merits of like their political movement. I think like it's kind of destructive the way that they do it. It's like better than MAGA in terms of like the destruction done, but I think that they are selling a kind of vision of America that I don't think is
Can we
accurate.
walk through it, Hutch? Because like I am actually not sure that there's that much disagreement on policy between you and Majority Report. So number one, you're in favor of some version of
I'm gonna hit the road here real quick. So I just want to say, I just two quick questions just like popped into mind. I can't even remember the first one. Oh, the first one was again, I take your point about Joe Manchin, as long as he's serving, in a lawmaking capacity where he coalitions with the Democrats. Now that he's out of office, obviously he has no congressional utility. So to the extent that Joe Manchin doesn't endorse Democrats and shit talks Democrats, you agree that Joe Manchin in 2026 is not part of the coalition, but that he was in 2024 as a sitting member of Congress. Now Joe Manchin, because you mentioned he was instrumental when he was a member of Congress.
No.
Now
Hutch
he has no
granted that he
instrumentality.
Hutch granted that he wasn't part of the coalition, but he could distinguish how he treats them based on their instrumentality of his effectiveness.
But he said something earlier about, he goes, Joe Manchin was instrumental, and he was in a lot of Biden legislation, but that doesn't give him a pass. Right, but that doesn't give him a pass for forever, is what I'm saying, right?
Right, but he wasn't a part of the coalition then. Like, on the grounds of coalitionness, he was not in the coalition. He may have been more useful for other reasons, and maybe he would have treated him differently. But on the grounds of, is he part of my side or is he opposition? He was more opposition than Hassan Piker was. That's what Hutch said.
No. Here, but I think we can address this in a different way. If Emma Vigeland announced a run for a district and she was competitive in a red district, I would endorse her and tell my people to vote for her. And the same kind of thing applies to Manchin.
even though she's in opposition. In your
Yeah,
mind.
I
Or
was just
I actually don't think that she would
right.
qualify for
Yes.
opposition. Right. So then this opposition thing is like
Sh-
she literally has a seat at the table.
she's like-
The opposition literally has a seat at the table on your view.
Well, the congressional majority is, I think, are like a separate kind of like higher order issue, though.
It seems
I think,
whenever
like,
we're trying to
that,
get
like,
clarity on the
I would,
rule,
I would,
the rule changes and becomes like
well, that's why that's what I meant. That's why I was asking, because I took his point to say whether or not Manchin was part of the coalition when he was a senator is irrelevant because he had instrumentality as a voting member of the Democratic coalition. Joe Manchin's not in office now, so now you would agree that he's less useful and is even less part of the coalition than Emma Vigeland, because now he's not voting for anything and he's shit-talking Democrats.
yeah. In the context of
Yeah, okay.
2024, Emma was a stronger Kamala soldier than Joe Manchin.
Perfect. And then the second question is about Kyle, and the false equivalences and stuff like that. And yeah, to the extent that he's calling Cory Booker MAGA light. Now, maybe there's a discrete issue where where Cory is not far away from a particular MAGA position. I'd need to know the context.
Israel,
But what do
I
you
think.
make of? Like, I remember.
Which pause. Can we just say
because it went viral, and it
Schumer
was
went out
funny.
and said part of my job as leader is to make sure Israel is funded. And do you think it's like a bad criticism of like some Democrats that they're basically shades of Republican when it comes to Israel policy? Is that like even wrong?
It's not inaccurate to say that there are a lot of Democrats and Republicans that agree that the United States should provide for Israel's
Right. So
security.
it doesn't even feel like that's an inaccurate statement if it was made of Cory Booker that he's Republican light on Israel. It feels like it's true.
I was talking in a more broad sense. I can't give you particulars, but in a more broad sense, I think he does regularly kind of conflate the entire Democratic Party with Republicans.
So my last question is, and again, getting back to Kyle about the false equivalence thing, what do you make of when Democrats do well, like electorally? Kyle cheerleads that. Kyle like takes fucking victory laps and he hypes the Democrats up. Like, do you remember? Because it went viral after the November 2025 election where there was a blue wave. He lit up that cigar, had his shades on, and was like hyping up the Dems and shit talking the Republicans and stuff like that. Like,
but if
what
I
do
were
you
to go
make
to his Twitter account and search for, Mikey Sherrill or Abigail Spanberger, I don't know what I'll find, but I would not be shocked if he was calling them, I don't know, pro-Israel, like pro-Zionist, or I don't know, whatever.
What if that's true?
Like,
What if that's true though?
Well, no, I
Yeah.
mean, like that's one particular issue, but I'm saying like it wouldn't shock me if I found a lot of tweets of him like cutting them down a size.
well, I don't know. Like, I don't have time to unpack this here because again, my line isn't does he criticize Democrats? I don't give a fuck. I'm fine if he criticizes Democrats as long as he criticizes
No, I'm okay with criticizing, but there's criticizing and then there's saying that Gavin Newsom vetoed single payer. There's a big universe of difference between those
if
things.
he said that, if he said that which is factually untrue, I totally agree. It's a separate thing. But you said cutting Abigail Spanberger down to size, and to me, I don't give a fuck. I don't need him to.
You cut
I don't
down
necessarily
Plattner.
need
You
him.
cut down Plattner, and if Plattner won, I bet you would be cheering against Susan Collins, and you wouldn't really. If someone came, oh come on, Hutch, you cut down Plattner to size, like you would be like, oh who cares? I can do that.
No, but he'll cut them down in the general. That's my point. There's a huge difference between attacking Democrats that are in the primaries still and the Democrats that are in the general. And that's not even to say that you can't or shouldn't criticize Democrats that are in the general. But when the criticisms are based on things that are just like simply not true, and if it's a constant kind of push of a larger narrative of there being this big bad evil establishment that is, seeking to squash like any and all like progressive movement in this country, which I find fucking ridiculous, then I think that it's a larger.
It's not about the fact of
problem.
So it's not about the fact of criticism. It's about whether the criticism is factual.
Factual and not in service of some larger narrative that I think hurts the
That's
only the Democratic
that's going to be
Party,
turtles
but-
all the way down. If it's about some larger narrative that you think hurts the Democratic Party, they just take a different view. They think
that
it
is
helps
what
him.
this is all about.
I know, but they feel
Yeah,
that.
But I think they're wrong, though. I think they're wrong. I
Right,
think
but
that
that's
they're
just-
wrong.
Let me
about-
just close the loop
Yeah.
on this and I'll peace out.
Yeah.
I was not surprised when Kyle did that because I guess, not that I watch all of Kyle's videos, I just don't have the time for it. But I'm familiar enough with his content and Crystal's content and conversations I've had with them privately and when they've been on my channel. they celebrate. They actively celebrate. They just don't note it clinically and move on. I think they're more celebratory, for example, than the Majority Report, than either Sam or Emma. When the Democrats kick Republican asses, they are hyped about, especially Kyle. Kyle, much more so even Crystal, he treats it like team sport, lighting that cigar, shit talking the Republicans, hyping up the Democrats. As long as he does that, like, that guy's part of my coalition. So that's what I say. So listen, bro, appreciate it. This was supposed to only be 30 minutes. This is why I don't stream with you guys anymore.
You fucking love it, bro.
I do. I do. Yeah. I do. Like I said, I kept texting, like, give me another 30 minutes. Give me another 30 minutes. Give me 45 minutes and stuff like that. It's fun. It's fun. Even when we're circling the drain, it really is. I just don't know how you guys sit on your ass and do this for 8 to 10 hours a day. I don't know how you do it. Like, my back is sore, my head is sore. Like, it's a discipline. It really is. Like, drugs. You know how when Hassan, was it Hassan who said, talked about how hard streaming was or whatever, and he got a lot of shit for it? Was that Hassan?
Yeah, it was.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I don't even think what he said on paper was like that bad, but it's the way that he framed it that I think. But
I agree.
His point about your social battery being drained is like not even controversial. I think that is for sure a thing.
Yeah, I genuinely don't know. Like, the way my channel works, like when I do like recording stuff, like it's very rarely even like, 3 in a row. Like, it's usually one, and then I'm doing research on another one. So there are like breaks and shit in between. Genuinely, I could not do it. You guys are superhuman.
You gotta love it. You gotta love it.
Yeah. Love of the game. Listen,
it was really good talking to you. Yeah, I had really. Yeah. I'm glad you came by. This is great. I think we should do it more often.
Yeah. We should start a podcast with like problem. Only liberals and then we can have guests and stuff every week. And
but we should get a Conaboy back too and start like a live and learn knockoff, a live and learn cover band. So
we could do live, learn, love, or whatever that one was. Live, laugh, love.
Remember, we did that. Live, laugh, love, because we need laughter. All right, no, listen, guys, it was fun. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Later,
Thank you.
I was going down a place, Hutch, but I'll give you. I've been talking a lot, so I'll let you.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think that you're actually. I think you're closer to Emma than I think you. I think that your issues with them are with respect to their emphasis, with respect to their the slant of their reporting, with some of their like views from like or almost like bird's eye view about how the structure of power works, and certainly within the Democratic Party. But if you were to go policy by policy, like, I think you would be more aligned with Majority Report than you are with like a lot of centrist Democrats. I think that you would be in favor of
I'm sure there would be policy disagreements because they really like rent control, for example. And my understanding is that basically every economist, left wing and right wing, thinks that rent control is bad. And so
that's what
I think I think they're more closed off to market solutions. I think both of them are probably anti-capitalist, probably Emily more than Sam. I think she is like anti-capitalist. I think she does envision a more kind of socialistic structure. But I'll give you a good example of like where I really depart from Emma, and like where there's like a wide cavern between us, which I watched their coverage on election night in November.
Was it sad?
I watched.
I thought Emma cried. Was like very upset.
She didn't cry, but like, so when I was covering the election, I was telling my chat going into it, I'm not going to be satisfied unless this is a really dominant victory. And then what ended up happening was that it was even more dominant than I thought it was going to be. Like,
are you talking about 2025 or 2024?
2025.
Got it.
Just this last November.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Maybe I didn't specify the year, but so the vibes on my stream, bro, we were dancing. We were like, holy fucking shit. Like, the Republicans are fucked. Like, we were euphoric. The vibes were immaculate. And then I tuned over to the Majority Report's coverage, and that was like straight up depressing. Because what was happening was there were early reports coming in that Mikey Sherrill and Spanberger's margins were exceeding expectations. And she was legitimately pissed off that people were talking about that. And she was undercutting the idea that their victories were notable. Like, they were watching the news, and the news was reporting on what was happening. And so there was this narrative kind of emerging that Mamdani was maybe underperforming a little bit relative to expectations. Obviously, what he did was crazy impressive, and I've really liked what I've seen from him so far as governor or mayor. But the other part was that Spanberger and Cheryl were looking like they were, especially I think Cheryl in New Jersey. I think she especially really overperformed because I think that race was projected to be a little bit closer.
That was very impressive. Yeah.
And so when they were watching the news coverage of it live on their stream, and she was saying stuff like, the newscaster would say that it sure looks like they're overperforming, and then she would say stuff like, no, they're not. Like she was so invested in that moment in minimizing the wins of the so-called moderates and trying to inflate the win of the progressive. So that to me is like the big difference between me and her, is because I think she's invested in the Democratic Party in a way that is like exclusively focused on reshaping the party into a more progressive like structure. I think that is like her number one priority. Or
here's my commitment to you. I will watch that election coverage and I'll examine it and I'll do a vibe analysis. And I will be honest about it. I will see if the vibes are off, because I think that there's a point to be made there. If you're kind of poo-pooing Democratic victories, places you don't want, it could be a little bit of a vibe terrorist action. I don't know, even if that's true, what do I make of that? Like what do I make of that?
The narrative. The establishment, the big bad establishment, they serve capital and they want to prevent progress. That's their narrative.
Oh, but I grant that that's their narrative then.
Yeah. And so anytime establishment candidates come, or quote unquote establishment candidate, I mean, it's a very nebulous term, but come along, she will kind of nip at their heels.
Okay.
That to me is like where there's a big disconnect between me and her, because I think, obviously money has an influence in politics, and obviously big donors generally don't prefer like more leftist type candidates. So it's not that there's no merit to that, but I think that the reason why the progressive movement hasn't caught more steam in this country is because of their own failings, largely because of their own failings, their own sort of misperception about where the public is at. And they blame the establishment for their electoral mediocrity in the previous.
Yeah, I've heard you say this before, and I'm not saying that that there isn't an element of like the onus is on the candidate to appeal. I don't understand how you reconcile that with your position for people who want to focus on the failures of Kamala, so their particular failure, but like where the response to you, and I actually find this sometimes often slimy, when you're like, was it a mistake not to vote for endorse Kamala? Was it a mistake for this? Or like, I actually find it very annoying when they won't answer that question and they try to deflect. So I'm with you there. But why, if that's your view on the failures of the progressive movement, or is there a double standard? I'll just ask you, why do you treat it differently? If someone says, they didn't treat us fairly, we had all these disadvantages. If your response is just, well, your candidate failed, but that doesn't really address whether or not what they're saying is true, and it's not something you would tolerate if they try to change the subject on you in the context of Kamala, and they say, well, Kamala was a bad candidate, the onus is on her to appeal to the population. You can't blame the entire world for your troubles and on influencers. I actually do resent it when they do that pivot. Why is it not the same kind of thing?
I actually think that this is like a make-believe thing that's just simply not true, because when Hillary Clinton lost, for example, there was endless intra-party commentary / debate about all the granular reasons for her loss, including her campaign failures. Chief among them being ignoring the Rust Belt states. That was like the big one that people were talking about at the time. When Kamala Harris lost, there was nonstop discussions within liberal spaces about all the ways that she could have run a better campaign. And there's like a few top line issues that we've talked about a lot. We don't need to get into those. So I actually see like robust post-mortem analyses of prominent liberal, of elections for like prominent liberal candidates that fail. And I do see a willingness to dive into the crosstabs and really try to unpack like all the ways that the campaign could have connected with voters a little bit better. And you just don't see that with progressives, like basically ever. Can you think of a single high-profile progressive loss where that happened with progressives? Like there was an intra-progressive kind of conversation about how could we have met the voters more, or how could we have connected with them more? You never hear that. All you hear is AIPAC, donors, establishment, rigged. And it sounds a lot like MAGA to me. And I think that people like Emma and that whole space, like they constantly play into that. So I just philosophically, like really profoundly disagree with them, just prescriptively about like what are the problems, like, and so there, that motivates like a lot of my thinking about viewing them as like allies or not. Like I think if you're only interested in helping to elect progressives, I don't think you're really an ally. Like I think you should be willing to tell your audience, obviously, you know, Joe Manchin, if you live in West Virginia, obviously you should vote for it. I think they're unwilling to do that for the most part, to like fully commit.
Well, I'm not sure how many opportunities have arisen, except in the primary context, for them to discuss the shortcomings of their candidate, because their candidate hasn't been selected in the last 3 cycles. You know, you had Clinton wasn't their preferred candidate, Biden wasn't their preferred candidate, probably wasn't your preferred candidate either. I think wasn't my preferred candidate.
No, but what did they say about like Bernie's loss
in the
both
primary?
of those
Right.
elections?
What I'm trying to say is there is a willingness on behalf of the left to look at the crosstabs when it comes to the general election. In the primary contest for the national candidates, I agree. They have these narratives about Bernie that he was cheated in 2016 and he was cheated in 2020. In 2024, you have this odd situation where Biden drops out. So we basically just have these two. The sample size is of 2. Sample size is what happened in 2016, where there was the DNC putting thumb on the scale, but it wasn't what I consider to be, quote unquote, rigging the primary. I want to grant that, though. You also have the structural component there of super delegates that gave Hillary Clinton almost like a fait accompli feeling. That might not be, quote unquote, rigging it. Yeah, but it is an element of a perceived unfairness. Okay, and so I think that 2016 is like an area where, yeah, you don't have to grant the rigging, but you can understand why it's like it's not. Let's look at all the crosstabs, because like there's a lot of shit that was happening there in 2016 that makes a kind of like unwillingness to check the crosstabs. It doesn't strike me quite as much, but I'll let you respond to that and then go to 2020.
Yeah, I mean the very existence of super delegates is fucking crazy, and I know they made big changes after 2016, and they have way less influence now. First of all, wait a second, is Ryan Getty in the chat?
Well, I don't
you
see
guys,
him.
is he here?
He's not in mine.
Somebody was saying you got to let Ryan Getty in the call. I would love to have him come in.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I think he probably takes more your view on this, but
Maybe.
like the super delegates, all that, like that's valid, and that is like unfair and undemocratic in my opinion. I'm glad they made changes. I would just as soon get rid of super delegates. I think it's kind of crazy and just technocratic in a way that turns people off. It makes people think like, oh, you think the voters are so stupid that you need this failsafe, which may not even be true. Like I'm not even taking a position on that, but it just looks like bad. And then, you know, obviously there were other issues in 2016 as well. You know, obviously the DNC had a preference for Hillary, but the nuance there, Pisco, my brother, who I love,
My enemy. Did you see the title of my stream? My enemy.
No, I did not. The nuance there is that the emails that were hacked by Russia and then laundered to WikiLeaks, who then were parroted by Donald Trump like over 100 times when he was stumping in the final like 30 days of that election, were all dated from April and beyond. And at that point, the media was very invested in playing up a horse race kind of narrative because it drove ratings. But at that point, every credible pollster understood full well that Bernie had no path to victory.
In the general?
And so I think in the primary against Hillary, because he decided he was going to stay until the convention. I think he dropped out shortly before the convention, but his thinking was he was going to do that to pressure her to move on policy, which
I'm just going to grant you. We need to go into this. Like, I grant you that Hillary Clinton was the favorite of the voting Democratic,
and it wasn't because of the DNC.
And I
she
don't
did not win because of the DNC.
Now
that's not why.
I think sometimes it's hard to disentangle. Like, is the effect of inevitability causing people because they want to vote for someone who is more well known or someone who they perceive to be a winner. Is that playing on it? But like, I feel like that is just baked into every election that it's very hard to disentangle. And so I'm not going to count that. I'm not saying that it shows that they're correct.
Bernie struggled with black voters a lot in 2016 and in 2020. And you cannot win a Democratic primary without the support of black voters or where the support that he had. He also struggled with older voters. That's a really important block because they vote in larger numbers than the younger people. Those two things are the most crucial points of analysis when it comes to his losses in both 2016 and 2020. And you never heard any of these like progressive populist left-wing social media pundits ever address that. Like it never came up. It was only the DNC rat fucked Bernie in 2016 and then Amy and Pete rat fucked Bernie in 2020. They never talked about like the concrete reasons why he actually lost.
I hear, and I think that that's a failing. And I do find it annoying that there's constant like victim attitude among certain people on the left. I totally agree with that. And I think it's of certain libs as well, where there are people who are like, the FBI rat fucked Hillary when they did, right? Comey rat fucked Hillary Clinton. But Hillary had other problems in her campaign and a myopic focus on, well, the FBI screwed her. And when they did, right? Like that can cause you not to realize certain things. So I'm not denying that in the recent primaries, 2016, 2020, 2024, you cannot at all, like that is just you cannot extrapolate from that from 2024. But the recent ones, there has been a failure among some people on the left to look at their Bernie's own problems related to messaging. Bernie, who else?
It's all of them. All of the progressive candidates, Katie Porter, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, all of them. They all always explain their losses because
of money, AIPAC, and money.
The establishment, establishment. So they frame the Democratic Party as an evil institution trying to suppress the true will of the people. That's their grand narrative that they spin.
I think they have the view that money has a corrupting influence on elections. And in certain of these situations, for example, in the Jamal Bowman primary, the introduction of AIPAC money, which they view as illegitimate and illegal and shouldn't be done, or at least at a very bare minimum immoral, that they view that as having a corrupting influence and as a kind of an external factor, an exogenous factor coming into the election that somehow taints it. But so does the Democratic Party. So does the Democratic Party that's been in their platform for the last 3 presidential cycles to pass a constitutional amendment to end Citizens United. So it's not that they have a view it's not that they're wrong that they have a view that money has a corrupt influence in politics. That's not the issue. The problem is they entirely blame external forces for their losses, and they frame it as the Democratic Party itself corruptly rigging elections against them to block them from actually delivering for the American people. It's this grievance-based victimhood kind of framing that I think is not only wrong, but really destructive. I think the 2016 primaries with the Democratic Party is one of the most destructive things that's happened to our politics. It's probably the second most destructive thing behind Trump. Listen, in terms of the culture that it fostered. I didn't support Jamal Bowman in the primary. I don't really like Jamal Bowman that much at all. But I want you to deal with the strongest version of the argument. And the strongest version of the argument, for example, in that one is the following. They didn't like Jamal Bowman's stance on Israel, and they flooded all of this money from AIPAC. AIPAC money is illegitimate. It shouldn't exist. It's wrong. And because they had this money in, they were able to manipulate voters. They were able to have a huge leg up in a race, and it was fundamentally unfair because of that. Now,
if that's to
rebut that, you have to be like, well, either your argument is, well, legally they're allowed to do it, in which case you're not addressing what they're saying, right? Because they're not saying it's illegal. Okay. Or you have to say, well, no, it's not unfair for some people to have more money than you. It's not unfair for outside. Okay, go first, sir.
That wouldn't be my argument either. The argument that I would make was that Jamal Bowman was down like 16 points before AIPAC spent a dime in that race. And that when you actually talk to the voters of his district, the number one reason that they didn't like him, well, there were two reasons. Number one, he voted against the infrastructure bill. And number two, he did the fucking alarm shenanigans in Congress. And he behaved like a clown and got caught
if that's true,
and then lied about it afterwards.
If that's true, that's a pretty good argument. Yeah. I'm not even saying, I'm just telling you, like, they might not know that, right? They might just be stupid on that.
Well, that's a different problem then.
That's what I mean. But that's what I mean. Like, but people can be like stupid with respect to a given topic. Like, they didn't know that, right? Or now, if you introduce them and like, I still don't care, I still think that this is a determining factor. Or they could say something like this: well, notwithstanding the lead, I still think the AIPAC money was dispositive. We would have been able to turn things around if X, Y, Z. That I think is a little bit more whatever. But you can making the argument that, well, you would have lost anyway, is maybe something to say that the election was legitimate. But it doesn't get to the heart of what they're talking about with the AIPAC money, you know, which is that this kind of shit makes it impossible for us to know at the end of the day. Now, I don't actually even agree with that. I think AIPAC should be, and organizations like AIPAC should be protected, under the First Amendment for certain kinds of their speech and shit. And I don't even think that you call those elections illegitimate. Biden had a lot of money from different places, so I think that calling something illegitimate invokes other things. But all I'm trying to say is, you are construing this as like this malicious attitude among people on Majority Report and among people in these different leftist spaces to refuse to acknowledge their own shortcomings. And maybe sometimes it is, but they also, on some of it, I'm not saying all of it, on some of it, there just is a different view about the legitimacy of certain institutions, certain practices, super delegates, AIPAC money, this kind of shit, that I think that we need to contend with. And I think that what you said right there, that's a good response. Like, it didn't really have an effect there.
We could apply that logic to MAGA though, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same logic. I mean, they just have a different view, right? You could phrase it that way. I mean, I would phrase MAGA as being partisan to the point of like cult status. You know, their partisanship.
Oh, I see what you're getting
to
at.
the point where
this is what I mean, so right? Like, no, I understand. Your point is basically like, you can't just claim ignorance, because you treat some people who could plausibly claim ignorance or plausibly claim different values poorly.
I'm saying their cup is full. Like they're not open to this information, because in service of the grand narrative, I keep referring to this grand narrative, but I think it's really important in understanding how they operate. Like that is the thing that is above everything else. Is like, they're this oppressed, suppressed, corruptly suppressed political movement in this country that would set the country free and unburden us from the stress of poverty or no healthcare and blah, 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 blah. If only, these evil institutions would just take their boots off of our neck. And you can't pierce that. In my experience, it's very difficult to pierce that and to get through to that. They will violently reject any other information because it's so reinforced with social media echo chambers, which is another part of this conversation that I think is making hyperpolarization, hyperpartisanship like way worse in this country.
Is the kind of groupthink and association.
And if I felt, and I've had conversations where I felt like in that moment, my determination was like, I think maybe there's an opening here that I can be persuasive. And in those moments, I take a kind of different tone. But for the people whose cup is like really full and you're just never going to move them away from this, I think what I want is more people visibly attacking that premise, because I think that premise has bled into the mainstream.
Okay, but that
springs from all that and it bleeds into the mainstream, which I find to be very destructive to our like body politic.
I want to address both things. The first is like the MAGA comparison one, because I think it's a decent point. I do in fact treat certain MAGA people who I think are more volitional and knowing with respect to their distortions, like for example Trump, who I think oftentimes is knowing, Miller, all these people, as way worse than the people who are just like put the wool over the eyes. That's one of the bases I have to distinguish between like the MAGA Colin who says, I think they stole it, versus the people who I know should know better. So I do treat them differently in that respect. But the kind of point that I'm driving at is, a lot of this could be described as this kind of like malicious failure to recognize or just like conscious disregard of like facts in front of them in a way that I would feel is like very bad. Part of it is just a values question. On Israel Gaza, for example, their whole outlook on that is just so informed by their moral position on Israel, Gaza, that in light of that view, right, a lot of what they say still like makes sense on that view. Like if you take the view that they do, that for example, Biden with just a phone call simply could immediately set things in Israel and Gaza the way he wanted to, and if you take the view that Gaza is undergoing a heinous Holocaust, right? If you take that view, their conduct in response to Biden makes sense, right? That makes sense.
I don't think it does though.
Why?
I don't because I don't think that moral framework is coherent or consistent. It's utterly incoherent to me. We're getting new reports. It seems like by the month, there's a new independent organization coming along and giving their own estimate of how many people are going to die because of the USAID cuts. And all of them consistently place the number between 10 and 15 million people. 1/3 of those people are kids. So if this is about like, I can't support Kamala Harris because she supported
that's not,
genocide,
no, that's not what I'm talking about. I don't think that makes sense on that view. And I agree with that. Mm-hmm. That not voting for Kamala doesn't make sense on that view. I totally agree with that. What I'm saying is the kind of coverage, the Democrats supported this shit. Democrats are partially responsible for this. Biden is responsible. He's Genocide Joe. Like, I agree that the voting there, that there should be a principle of harm reduction that cuts across the specific views there. But the coverage issue, why are you making it such a focus of your coverage? That kind of stuff is explained by that worldview. And it's not necessarily attributed to just hate Democrats, just hate Democrats, just hate Democrats. That might be a part of the associations. And yeah, that's all I'm saying there. Now, some people, I think, are like that. And they are just America bad, Democrats bad, we hate power, and we just always want to be like, I don't know, on the outs, commenting and being Walter and whatever the other Muppet guy is and throwing peanuts. There are some people who cherish that role and for whom obtaining power, it's almost like Heath Ledger's Joker, right? I'm just a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do with it if I caught it. Like they're immune to power and they don't really want it because they don't want the awesome responsibility it takes. They'd prefer to be on the sidelines. So it runs the gamut. But yeah.
I don't think it's so much that is, I think they view political power within our liberal framework as inherently corrupt. And so why would they want their preferred candidates to be in a position of power? Because that would mean that they were necessarily corrupt. So you see them, like, I'm not saying all of them are doing it, but you can see a lot of like decently large lefty accounts are fully distancing themselves from and criticize and condemning Mamdani because he's actually like ascending to power in a way that is really quite impressive.
Those people are people where I'm like, now I'm seeing more indicia of that kind of like black pilly, eternally on the outs, fringe people who just, there's almost a fetishization of being on the margin, of being a dissident. And in some cases, some of those, and I will grant you, some of these people have been the best artists, the best thinkers, have given useful insights before in the past, who have that kind of a view. So I don't think that if you have that fetish, that you're necessarily, everything you say is useless. But I do recognize that there are such kinds of people, those dead enders. I don't think that necessarily should affect how we conduct our conduct, in that, like, if we're convinced that these people are marginal, because as Mamdani goes up, they get more angry at Mamdani.
Yeah.
I don't think that it should be a basis for us to disengage with lefties or to treat them horribly who are not part of that.
I don't want you. Wait. Hold on. We're getting hung up
so
on
what is the entailment? What is the prescription? What do you want?
You can be so nice to these people. Just like Jessiah, I think is, or I think Econoboy might be a better example of this. Like Econoboy is like dispositionally very nice. And like usually I've only seen him like really kind of go demon mode a couple of times. But apart from that, he seems like a very courteous person who will avoid falling into the trappings of like ad hominems and just going full ham. Like then I would put like Jessiah a little bit above him, and then I would put you and me a little bit above Jessiah because we're more willing to kind of just like go fucking for the jugular. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have to be mean to people. You don't have to go out of your way to try to like humiliate them or embarrass them or mock them. You can be so nice and so civil and still like confront some of these structural problems that I think exist in the progressive left right now. like I think we need to start getting at identifying what those problems are and like really like calling it out, because I think those problems, as I said a moment ago, have bled into the mainstream. Like we can say small beans, lefties, you know, whatever, but I do think that collectively all of their audiences really do influence the way that normies like view politics. And I think a lot of normies have bought into their narrative of this, and that's what feeds like the current wave of populism, which, you know, I think that's a bad sign.
This might be more controversial then, because and I don't know. Tell me why I'm so much more frustrated with Chuck Schumer than Kyle Kalinske. Tell me why. Why is that? I genuinely feel it, and I hope you think about
more frustrated. Like, are you though? Because he fucking
am.
He hates Chuck Schumer with the fire of 1,000 suns.
No. I'm saying as between there's people on the left that you can be frustrated with, right? You can be frustrated because the lefties are bleeding in with their whatever the thing that you just said was. Yeah. I am just so much more angry and frustrated with people like Chuck Schumer, Fetterman, people who voted for the some of these measures, some of the people who voted for the Lake and Riley Act. I'm so much infinitely more angry at them than people like Kyle Kalinske. Tell me why. Is it because I'm a socialist now? I'm not. Is it like, what is it?
It's because they have power. And what they're doing with that power is not meeting your standard of what is called for in this moment. But I think the way that we engage and talk about politicians is going to be a totally different framework than how we talk about like the broad discourse in this country. So like, you know, I'm more frustrated with like obviously like Donald Trump and our politics.
Sure, yeah, no, obviously like
politics more broadly than like left wingers or whatever. But
yeah, no, grant that. I'm saying
you and me can directly engage in the online punditry space in ways that we don't have ready access to a lot of these politicians. So we've talked to some politicians, but I mean, you and me, we can just like directly, literally just like, True. In the case of you know, have a direct conversation with Kyle or engage with them on social media or whatever. And so there's just much more access there. So I think there's more room for us to make a difference in this way. And I think that is in service of a larger goal of like being more productive in the way that we exert influence on the Democratic Party. Like, I want to eliminate this idea of it shouldn't even come into anyone's thought process of like, well, you know, like you should not be leveraging your vote in the general for concessions. That's fucking insane. It is a suicide pact. It's insane. And like, take a look at Biden. Like he was able to be pressured from the left flank while he was in office. Like you have so much more opportunity to pressure politicians to adopt this or that policy position once they're in office. But this idea of like, if you don't adopt my particular policies on this, and this issue, I'm going to help Republicans win. That is so destructive.
No, I
think we need to be like really aggressive.
No, I definitely, but that's why like, I think that I'm not hearing that from the specific people that I'm interacting with. Because the specific people I'm interacting with, like when I interacted with Prime, I did hear it. And I think people saw how mad I got when Ogre Boy and this other person were in my chat talking about how actually it makes logical sense to withhold your vote in a swing state versus in a safe state versus in a swing state. People see how fucking upset it makes me. It's just not the thing that I'm hearing from those people. Now, maybe if I were to ever speak with Hassan, I would hear that, and people will be able to judge how I will react to that for sure. So I hear you that the part of your analysis here is, well, we're more likely to have an influence on the influencer circle. This might be controversial as well. We're not going to end them. We have no power to, and they're going to have an audience, and we will not be able to diminish them. And the only thing we'll be able to do is make our own content and try to appeal to them. Like, I don't know how we can destroy them, like, or make them irrelevant. How do we do that?
I don't think that's a realistic goal. Like, okay, I've never said we need to make sure that people like, you know, Hassan don't have a platform.
Okay, so
I don't think that's
this is the issue. I think that your goal could be accomplished by convincing people in their audience, perhaps.
That's what I feel like I'm doing in my own way. That's what I feel like I am doing. That is my goal, is to peel away. I mean, I have people in my chat that say that they used to watch a lot of Hassan. And
here's my question for you: who do you think is more likely to peel away people from Hassan Vanguard community, you or me?
I truthfully can't answer that question. I really don't know.
And
But
what
I
basis do you have to
but-
say that your strategy is better than mine?
I don't know if I am making that argument, like in terms of like the specific, like how you attack those arguments. That matters less to me. But I also want to. This kind of reminds me of the conversation that I had when I was in Wick's panel last week, where I reject the idea that there's like a universal standard for how to like pull people away from certain communities. Like it might be the case that your method is more effective for like 75% of the people that we might pull away, and my method is more productive for like that 25%. But you and me we're going for the same thing, but we just have different tactics. And maybe these people that are convinced by me are not going to be convinced by you.
Then the thing is, you need me then. And it's not a case of
I don't want to get rid of you.
That's what I mean. But then there's not a basis of criticism for what I do then. Then it's like we're different strategies.
The only criticism that I have is that we need to be attacking that grand narrative more. Like I think like if our goal is to beat Republicans and to get out of this like fascistic slide that we're in, and to make the Democratic Party better and empower them to do like better things and go further with legislation, then I think we should be talking about their grand narrative more and pushing back against it. We're not going to like kill their careers, but
yeah,
we can, I think, make a difference on the margins. And who knows how paradigms change all the time, and maybe people will no longer find their stuff appealing in like 3 years because they're just sick of the bullshit. But yeah.
Yeah, and I
have an appointment in a little bit, just so you know.
So before we end,
can we do some final thoughts? Go for it. Yeah.
Can we spend like last couple minutes? I can explain why I thought the conduit video wasn't good. And or do you want to save that for later and just give final thoughts?
I'm tempted to save that because I do want to spend some time unpacking that with you. Because I mean, I have like broad strokes that I want to say, but
okay. We'll save it. We'll save it.
Do you have time tomorrow to have a conversation?
Yes, we can talk about that, and I'll watch the majority report thing. Let me give you my final thoughts. I'll let you have the last word. I think that there are definite like disagreements between you and I on certain things. I think the first DOJ conversation showed that a little bit, and I think that is okay. But I largely think we have the same goal, right? We want to get Democrats elected. To the extent that we're engaging with these lefty audiences, we have this sort of innate human desire, as all humans do. We want to make more of ourselves, right? We want to spread ourselves. That's like the most, biological trait, to make replicas of our ideas in the context of this of going on. And so obviously you and I both want to convince people of certain of our ideas. I'm convinced that spending a lot of time, for example, on Collargate, where I think Hassan probably lied, spending a lot of time on, attacking them for every little thing, even when it's like not my, it doesn't interest me to do so, or where it's something like sort of tangential. That those kinds of interactions, in a general policy of like resentment and anger, is less likely to attract that audience, to the extent that we want to do that. And I think, go for it.
Collargate, number one, it was just funny, and so I was happy to get three weeks of content.
I'm not calling you bad. I'm not calling you bad for focusing on that. I'm not saying that was a wrong thing to do from that perspective. I'm just making what I think is a strategic assessment that I think the way I approach it is more likely to convince people on that side. And if that's the goal, then I think that's where we disagree on the strategy. But I'm not trying to say that there's this massive gulf between us in terms of the end goal. I don't want people to read into that. But I do think that a lot of this is a strategic conversation, and I'm not convinced that what I'm doing is strategically unsound on the sort of empirical front, or indeed on like sort of the direction of the party, because I certainly don't want to create a socialist state without any property, whatever. And I don't think that that's fair to say, and I don't think you're saying it. But yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. I think a lot of our disagreements are strategic or tactical, but not necessarily end goals. And on that, I'll give you the last word.
Nope. I mean, I would just echo what you said at the end there. I do think that the disagreement that we find ourselves in more often than not is about tactics. And, there's some broader strategy stuff, but Yeah, I actually don't have time to unpack this more. I do have to read out super chats before I go to this appointment. So I'll hit you up tomorrow and we can talk more about the conduit stuff.
All right. Much love. Talk soon.
All right. Yeah. Take it easy, buddy.
Well, that was a nice conversation. Yeah. So to give you my idea of like where the centerpieces of that conversation are, is in like the kind of lack of entailment, lack of prescription when it comes to the coalition, right? Because if the coalition includes people who we want to like promote for office and literally give a seat at the table and actively like almost attract in court to join these races and stuff, it doesn't seem like being in opposition is like that bad. It's not like a death sentence in terms of even elections. We will support people who are part of the opposition. Oof, yikes, right? So that's what the Manchin example is trying to draw out. And the concession that Hassan was less opposition than Manchin, like that's, and really the term opposition or not part of the coalition, I hope you understand the point there, is just operating as a synonym for didn't endorse. And so then it just becomes kind of like question begging / trivial, right? They didn't endorse, therefore they're opposition, because what it is to be opposition is to endorse or to not endorse, you know? And so like, so what's the so what of it, right? What does it matter that you're part of the opposition if you can treat members of the conceitedly part of the opposition like very, very well? And then that last point about strategy, I think is core, because to justify criticizing what I do or what people who are maybe more congenial, like Jessiah, to justify that, surely that is grounded not just in like it emotionally feels good. Surely it's grounded in we think it will actually result in good outcomes. And if it is, there needs to be some sort of like assessment that the strategy that I deploy is like unlikely or counterproductive to that end. And if that's the case, there needs to be some sort of like intuition of that or some sort of like explanation or justification for that, you know? Conversation was productive, but there's clearly a shifting morphine nondescript revulsion to leftism that hasn't been isolated. Yeah, it feels a little bit sometimes like a moving target. Oh yes, treat politicians with the lower standards than pundits because politicians are needed. But pundits are super important. So like, that's the thing, right? It's this kind of Schrodinger's punditry. Like, they're very, very important, these pundits, because they influence so many people. But politicians are so necessary. So which is it? And then it's like what I described the other day, where the rule starts to follow the dispositions of the given actors. In which case, it just feels like the rule is being developed ex post to map with the positions, as opposed to the positions from like a foundational perspective causing the results. Dispositions, right? The dispositions are forming the rule as opposed to the rule forming the dispositions. The Graham Plattner example, I think, is another good one, in that I'm sure Hutch has been vocally critical of Plattner. And I'm sure if Plattner said some dumb shit during the general, you think Hutch would like pull back from criticism? Maybe he would. But I wouldn't want him to, right? I don't take the view that just because we're in a general, we don't criticize. Especially because like I need to think about in the future, like my credibility, something I care about. I have to balance that with like the electoral consequences. And there's nothing inconsistent with saying, hey, this was stupid for them to say, this was wrong to say, this is a dumb position, I don't support it, but I support them in the general and you all should vote for them. You can actually take that position. Both Hassan and Manchin opted out of being part of the coalition. That's what not endorsing means. I don't understand how that, sure. They either opted out or weren't part of it. I don't understand, right? Like, isn't it the same thing? Is Schumer not in Hutch's coalition because he didn't endorse Mamdani? That's another like great point too, right? Is this coalition stuff just for national candidates, right? Because then I think there's a separate rule that Hutch would say, if I think he even said this, right? Like, that doesn't apply to local candidates and local elections. You don't have an expectation of that. Then the rule of coalition is just for the national candidate. So now we're not going to be able to draw more broadly from the experiences of other times where like the progressives pouted and didn't endorse for a given election, right? Because you have to be consistent. It can't be, well, we don't think about, but then maybe there's like another pundit rule, which is like Schumer as majority leader, doesn't have an obligation to endorse, but like regular pundits do, or progressives. And then I'm just like, wait. So now like the rule is becoming this fucking multi-armed hydra that changes based on the nature of the race, who's saying it, when it is, right? And so like we will use the local races that where the progressives didn't endorse against the pundit, but not against the politician. The politician is a lower standard, and the extrapolations about Manchin only apply to the president. Like, it just starts to become, I think, it would be easier to have the full rule laid out before we start doing this. And I also feel this way about many of the other, like, I don't know, recent controversies that I've like talked about. I'm sorry to bring it up again, but like the Ethan Klein lawsuit, where I provide a rule ex ante to analyze lawsuits. No one else does that, right? No one who criticizes me provides a rule that where we can like see if it's consistent and apply the principle. It just, whenever there's a comparison made or a hypothetical, it's like, well, that's different. Don't you know it's different? It's different. But it's different. Why is the difference significant? And we would only know it's significant if there was some sort of premised rule. And so at this point, I almost feel like we need to start with laying out the foundational principles in any of these kinds of conversations. Same thing with like the doxing, right? Doxing is justified if and only if A, B, C, or D. Viewpoint discrimination, like what we saw, global entry stuff. If the following conditions are met, we don't care about it. A, B, C, D, E. So that's where I feel like I get a lot of trouble is I start to bring up hypotheticals, examples, and then they're like, what, you really think it's the same thing? It's the same exact thing when Manchin doesn't endorse? Manchin who voted for this? Manchin who was vital to the fuck? You think that they're the same person? You think Manchin is the same exact person? As like, I know that Hutch didn't do that. I'm just sitting there. But that's how like I'm interpreting. Some people will probably like understand the comparisons and like totally miss the point of the comparison, right?